Hello and welcome back to my channel. Make sure you like and subscribe to my channel. Let's begin. Chapter 68, Confronting Feelings 2. The house was clean, the dishes were done, the family was fed, her brothers were busy saving the world, again, and her father was outside doing something. And she was under house arrest. Was it any wonder that Kurosaki Yuzu was bored? Yuzu sighed. She knew that they meant well. She and her sister didn't have the power to protect themselves from hell, so her family had to keep them together under constant guard. She knew that, and she knew that there was nothing she could do about it. But it still felt stifling. The knowledge that hell threatened the whole world drained the joy out of relaxing and watching television, or working on one of her spare time projects. But she still went and did them, because they were the only things she could do, and just sitting and worrying would drive her insane. There was something going on with Karin, though. She'd been rather distracted for the last couple of days. Yuzu had thought at first that it was just her way of dealing with the hell situation. Since Yuzu had been, she shivered, and decided to rephrase the thought. Since they had been kidnapped, and Karin had gotten out first. Yeah, that sounded better. But there was more, Yuzu could tell. Her young face twisted into something resembling mingled frustration and exasperation. She and Karin were twins, had known each other all their lives. Even after their mother died, even after their personalities went in two different directions in order to cope with the pain of loss, they could still read each other with hardly any effort. Karin was struggling with something, and hiding it. And every now and then, Yuzu could swear that Karin's eyes had turned a milky white, only to blink and they were normal as if they'd never changed. Oh, how Yuzu wished she could be like her sister and just flat out demand to know what was going on. Karin was so in control, so cool like that. But Yuzu couldn't do that. She knew that pushing her would only drive her away. Karin would tell her when she was ready. But that didn't stop her curiosity from growing. Seeing her sister watching her again, Karin repressed the urge to sigh. Yuzu knew something was up, she could see it in her eyes, even without activating her power. And her power seemed to have a mind of its own. Ever since that first activation, anytime Karin was even curious about someone's thoughts and feelings, her power would just flare up. She had to fight harder and harder to turn it off now. Karin felt like she had been tossed into a maelstrom. How on earth was she supposed to control this power, when it seemed to respond to her emotions? Was this what Ichigo felt, when he was trying to control his Ruriko? If this was standard, then the idea that her father, her extremely emotional, over-the-top father, was a Shinigami with enough control over his power to cast barriers over their home just boggled the mind. Karin winced. Just the incredulity and the quiet desire to know how they managed had stirred her Ruriko, and she could feel trickles of it moving towards her eyes, ready to tell her anything she wanted to know if she only laid eyes on the subjects of her thoughts. She fought it down, but she knew that at some point she'd be caught. And she didn't want to be caught when she couldn't control her own power. That was just embarrassing. She really envied Yuzu sometimes. She was so calm, so accepting, so at peace with the world. She'd have no problems controlling this power, Karin was sure. And even if she did, she wouldn't have trouble confessing her difficulties. Karin bit her lip, mentally debating whether to confide in her sister for the umpteenth time that morning. And once again, she decided against it. She knew it was her pride getting in the way, but Karin had spent years trying to become someone who didn't need to ask for help, someone who could take care of herself. Karin closed her eyes for a moment. In the end, she had wanted to be like her brother. Ichigo, who took no crap from anyone, who accepted every challenge issued and nearly always came out on top. He didn't like telling people about his childhood, because for Ichigo, all that was there was pain and guilt. And people respected that. Even the gang stopped bringing up their mother's death after Ichigo demonstrated he could and would put them in a hospital if they ever tried to use her against him. People looked at Ichigo, and saw an intelligent, diligent student who had loyal, steadfast friends. Sure, the orange hair put people off at first, but Ichigo just didn't seem to care. And in private, Ichigo almost never looked down to her. And while he nearly always scowled, she could the affection in his eyes. How many times had they shared a commiserating look at their father's antics? How many times had Ichigo let Karin see that tiny, real smile when they were doing something together? Was it any wonder that Karin had looked up to her big brother? Ichigo was everything Karin had ever wanted to be. And how many times had she seen him grit his teeth and try to refuse treatment after stumbling home injured from a fight? How many times had she and Yuzu listened in on the males of the house talking, only to hear Ichigo reject their father's quiet offers to do something about the gangs that constantly targeted Ichigo? Karin had equated pride with strength for so long, it was hard to let go. Again, she considered asking for help. No. This was her power. She would control it. Then, and only then, would she reveal her ability to her family. Just outside, Isshin wiped his forehead with the sleeve of his shihakusho. Between he and the two Kasumiyaji retainers, the Kurosaki household was possibly the most protected residence in Japan, barring, perhaps, Urahara's shop. But then, Isshin thought in tired amusement, that's just not fair to compare, since they have two Kido masters and a genius inventor. Kenryu glanced at Enryu for a moment, then gave a tired sigh. I think that's the best we can do, he muttered, looking up to the former Taicho for confirmation. Isshin nodded. Yeah, I think so. You want to go get your princess? It'll be easier to guard everyone if they're together. Without a word, Enryu nodded and jogged back to the house where Rurikayo was waiting. Doesn't say much, does he? Isshin observed conversationally. Is he mute? No, Kenryu denied. He has his reasons for his silence, but he can speak if needed. Let me just say, Kurosaki-sama, that I appreciate your family's aid and understanding in these times. It hasn't been easy. I imagine not. Isshin eyed Kenryu appraisingly for a few moments. Relax, I'm not going to make you fight the Togabito solo. You and Enryu are support and retreat specialists, right? Kenryu made an odd sort of twitch, a simultaneous relaxing and tensing. Yes, Kurosaki-sama. How did you know? You're the personal guards of a noble family's heir, Isshin explained easily, leaning against the wall of his house. It's standard procedure. If they've gotten through everyone else, then the only thing to do is to retreat and regroup. At that, Kenryu breathed a sigh of relief. Hi. I admit, Enryu and I would not be of much help in a direct fight against the Togabito. Enryu and I have primarily defensive Zanpakuto. That's fine, Isshin assured him. While I'm sure you could hold your own if the need arose, I would want you to be ready to carry my daughters to safety instead. Of course. I would ask, though, that we work in pairs, Isshin went on. You two have support skills which will keep us from exhausting ourselves against the Togabito, or from making fatal mistakes. Seeing Kenryu's apprehensive look, Isshin shook his head. Either you or Enryu would be here at all times to look after your princess and my daughters, and the heavy fighting would always be either me or Khan. Kenryu looked somewhat conflicted, but slowly nodded after several seconds. Only in a support role, mind you, he qualified. Our first duty is to Rurikayo-sama. Of course, Isshin agreed easily. Just as mine is my family. But that doesn't mean we can't work together to protect them both. My strength will act as your shield, and your support will keep me from falling. We're counting on each other, and together we will succeed. At that, Kenryu nodded again, more strongly. It was then that Enryu emerged from the house, quickly ushering a small figure in a pink kimono and a hat that completely covered her face. Isshin opened the door, and as soon as the princess was inside, the three men followed her in. Karin. Yuzu. Isshin called. We have guests. The two girls hurried to the room and froze when they saw the girl standing there. Allow me to introduce Kasumiyaji Rurikayo-sama, Kenryu told them. Rurikayo-sama, this is Kurosaki Karin and Kurosaki Yuzu, the sisters of Kurosaki Ichigo-sama and daughters of Kurosaki Isshin-sama, who was gracious enough to lend his aid in our time of need. We are most thankful for your assistance, Kurosaki-san, the girl spoke clearly, almost imperially, before bowing lightly to the sisters. And it is a pleasure to meet the family of the famous Kurosaki Ichigo. Yuzu and Karin glanced at each other, mirrored looks of utter confusion on their faces. Ichi and II is famous. After a few moments, Yuzu got over her surprise and bowed back to the girl. It's a pleasure to meet you too, Ruriko-sama. She ended it as a slight questioning lilt, unsure of what suffix to use. She glanced at Ruriko's friends, and the one with hair gave a slight nod of approval. Karin quickly repeated her twin's words, though she looked like she was preoccupied with something else. Girls, Ruriko will be staying with us for a while, Ishin explained. I'll let Khan know when he wakes up. Why don't you show her around the house? A dimension away, Ishin's son was fighting for his life. Zenai had once again called on Asahi no Kagami, but this time the ghosts that appeared were somewhat translucent. Ichigo wasn't sure, but he thought that might be because he'd already dispelled them once before. But Zenai had somehow become faster, stronger, so Ichigo had already unleashed Bankai and was dual-wielding Tensei Zangetsu. That didn't stop the ghosts from giving voice to other disturbing feelings, though. We're never going to live in peace, an illusion of Ichigo himself muttered resentfully. When and if we beat hell, we're going to be even stronger than we were before the FNG kidnapped Mom. Already have a plan for that, Ichigo grunted back just before blocking an absurdly fast strike from Zenai. As expected, the illusion vanished as soon as Ichigo acknowledged it. How long do you think you have before I turn on you too? The cheerful voice of Urahara Kisuke commented, even as Ichigo launched a silent Getsuga to shove Zenai back. Heido 4, Byakurai. Ichigo chanted, but Zenai had flickered away before the Kido could hit him, once more vanishing into the crowd of illusions. Ichigo grit his teeth, this was a highly annoying strategy, and DMN but it was effective. Hat and clogs. I mean, it's fairly obvious, right? I'm the one who gave your father his Jigai, and I had no trouble at all hiding my Hogyoku within Rukia's soul and trying to force her to become human. So I've got no problem sacrificing people's powers when I've got the bigger picture in mind. And let's face it, Ichigo-kun, your powers pretty much started this conflict. So, how long do you think you have before I swap out your human body for a Jigai that will keep you trapped in it? Ichigo scowled, but kept his focus on trying to locate Zenai. Ichigo, we've been rogues for over a century, a version of Yoruchi stood next to Urahara, trying to demand his attention. But Soul Society knows where we are now. You do realize that something's gotta give, especially if you keep attracting trouble. Not my fault, Ichigo said lowly. Doesn't matter if it's your fault or not, kiddo, Yoruchi told him bluntly. Face it, everyone knows that at some point you're going to go back to Soul Society and demand justice against those idiot nobles, and odds are spark off a civil war. No one would blame you for it, of course, Urahara continued where his friend left off. But you know perfectly well that life isn't fair. If you're the catalyst, then the fastest and easiest way to prevent civil war would be to keep you unable to start it. Ichigo scowled. DMN it all if he wasn't right. Yamamoto wouldn't hesitate for even a second, would he? Not even that long, Urahara agreed. And for the sake of peace, most of the other Taicho would go along with it. Of course, I'd fight on your behalf, and maybe manage to preserve your life, but your powers would definitely be sealed. Possibly your memories too. And there's no way I would let someone else do something to you, so I would have to be the one to betray you. It was so fast, Ichigo almost didn't catch it in time. He shunpaed away right as Zenai slashed with a Getsuga-enhanced Zangetsu right where he'd been standing a moment before. Then he blinked and shook his head. What was he doing? These were illusions. But, weren't they supposed to be preying on his fears and self-doubts? Oi! Zenai! What's going on with these illusions? Ichigo yelled. You figure it out, Zenai answered as he flickered in front of Ichigo, forcing him into a deadlock, each of Ichigo's Tensei Zangetsu struggling to overcome Zenai's two Zanpakuto. I'm sorry, Kurosaki-kun, a tearful Inoue murmured. I know you have every right to hate them, the Shinigami who kidnapped your mother and sent her to hell. But this is too much, Kurosaki-kun. You set hell on everyone. Even if it means you hating me forever, I have to keep you from doing anything like that again. So, when this is all over, I'm going to use my Soden Kishun to remove your powers. I'm sorry, Kurosaki-kun. I don't get it. Ichigo grunted as he shunted enough power down his arms to set his blades alight with Getsuga Tensho, slowly but surely overwhelming his Togabito aspect. Why are the illusions of people I trust betraying me? And then the answer struck him like a thunderbolt. Wait. You're able to focus Asahi no Kagami on different emotions? Zenai laughed as he deflected the blades to the side and tried to stab Ichigo in the side, only for the wizard to leap back and watch him carefully. Got it in one. This is one of the expanded abilities of Asahi no Kagami. While her default emotion is guilt, all I have to do is specify the emotion to focus on, and your own mind comes up with the scenarios. Kinda scary how possible they are, isn't it? Very, Ichigo admitted to himself. He could easily see Urahara sealing away his powers as a compromise instead of letting him die. And no matter how much Inoue didn't want to do it, Ichigo knew that she would take away his powers if she truly felt it was the right thing to do. But he wouldn't have it any other way. Sure, he'd resent losing his powers, but he'd understand. They had to do what they felt was right, just as he did. But as soon as he had thought those things, all the illusory people vanished. Ichigo blinked. Did you just banish the illusions? Nope. You did, Zenai told him casually. By recognizing the concept Asahi no Kagami was focusing on, and acknowledging your feelings. Asahi no Kagami's release command isn't just for sheets and giggles, Ichigo. She's meant to reveal the truth. Once you've recognized it, then she has no power over you. Now let's see how well you fare against this emotion. All at once, Ichigo was once more surrounded by ghosts. What is the nature of power? An image of Byakuya asked coldly. What is the nature of weakness? Who are you, you who were once weak and became strong? How did it come to be that you are different from all others? Why are you worthier of training, of the power you've been granted? Ichigo swallowed. He had given voice to a question that had quietly plagued him for quite some time, more often since Aizen's death. Aizen had chosen him because of the circumstances of his birth. Yet, surely there had been others in the past. Surely Isshin was not the only Shinigami to fall in love with a human. Surely he was not the only human Shinigami hybrid to have ever been born. And even if he had been, did that truly make him that different from other spiritually aware humans? Not that Ichigo knew of, not before Urahara had restored his Shinigami powers. Which meant there had to be something more. But Ichigo didn't know, and he wasn't sure he wanted to know. He was already so different from everyone else. What more could there be? Why did I train you? Urahara's voice asked pointedly, using one hand to readjust his hat so only one eye was visible. Why did I help you regain your Shinigami powers? In the time I took to train you, I could have rescued Rukia-chan, taken out the Hogyoku, and relocated to anywhere else in the world. What made you so noteworthy that I took you on as a student? Yet another question that bothered Ichigo occasionally. Why had Urahara trained him to rescue Rukia, instead of going to Soul Society himself? He and Yoruchi were so powerful, and former assassins. If anyone could have snuck into Soul Society and quickly and quietly retrieved the noble girl, it would have been them. So why? Why had Urahara taken an interest in Ichigo? Why had he pushed Ichigo to Shirkai, to Bankai? It would be simple to think that it had been an extra layer of insurance against Aizen, Urahara's true enemy. A combatant who had never seen Aizen's Shirkai, with the potential to reach Taicho class and beyond, had Ichigo merely had the right potential, and Urahara had taken advantage of him? Or had Urahara already had a personal interest in Ichigo? The shopkeeper and Isshin had a history, Ichigo knew. How far did that go? Was that the reason for Urahara training him, helping him? He's got a point, an illusion of Yoruchi agreed. I mean, come on. What were you thinking when you decided to save Rukia? Yes, she saved your family, so honor demanded you save her. But what would have happened if we had succeeded the way we originally planned? If Aizen hadn't been if Aizen hadn't been behind Rukia's execution, then what would have happened when we saved her? Ichigo swallowed. If he was honest with himself, he'd been an idiot who had no idea what he was getting into. Seriously, did he expect to save Rukia from Soul Society and not expect them to pursue them? If Aizen hadn't been an issue, then Soul Society would have hunted him, and by extension, Urahara, down. Blanching, Ichigo realized that his father and sisters might have become targets as well. Wow, he'd been stupid. His sense of honor wasn't worth their lives. Would it have turned out all right? He'd never know, but Ichigo was very glad that it hadn't come to that. And then a mirror image stepped out of the crowd. Ichigo looked at his own reflection, who looked just as uncertain as he felt. Am I nothing but a weapon? Was I born only to fight? Ichigo swallowed. Those private feelings, those thoughts he tried so hard to keep from acknowledging, he had no answer for them. He wanted to say that he was more than a weapon, but what was there to prove it? If he was born for more than war, then what purpose did he have? Ichigo froze, that strange sensation coming over him once again, stronger than before, this time forming a sentence that seemed to echo within his very soul. My life's purpose has been to protect, he whispered. And then, without warning, the sensation faded, leaving the feeling that Ichigo knew what came next but he couldn't, quite, grasp it. Ichigo wanted to scream in frustration, but this was hardly the time or place for it, and so he grit his teeth and forced himself to focus on the fight. Yet his mirror image spoke once more, utterly destroying any chance of focusing. Can I really even be considered human anymore? Will I ever be able to live a human life? Ichigo winced. He could hardly think of living without his powers anymore. He couldn't imagine living without being able to sense and handle any spiritual disturbances where he lived. He'd once told Hitsugaya that he had a human life to live, but that was when there was still a chance. Now, Ichigo knew that Soul Society would never leave him alone. Neither would Hueco Mundo. Could Ichigo settle down in the living world and lead a human life? The answer to that had never been more unclear. Yet Ichigo knew one thing. My humanity compels me, he breathed. It didn't matter if he was as human as he once was or not. It didn't matter if he could live as a human or not. He'd started human, and he'd retained his humanity. Whatever he did, it would be guided by who he was at heart. Having trouble, Ichigo? Zenai taunted, his voice not giving any indication of where he actually was. Even if it did, Ichigo had no idea if this was the real Zenai, or merely an illusion. He had to dispel them, but how could he do that if he had no answer for them? Ichigo blinked. Wait, Zenai gave me the answer to that. I have to recognize the concept and acknowledge my feelings. He opened his mouth to answer, but was startled when he felt cold steel stab through his middle. You took too long, the Togabito criticized, sounding rather disappointed. I told you, don't get distracted. Yeah, you're right. I was distracted. Ichigo admitted, his Ajucha's mask beginning to form across his face. But you seem to have forgotten, it takes more than a sword through my gut to finish me off. With that, Ichigo swung with both Tensa Zangetsu, forcing Zenai to yank Asahi no Kagami out and retreat or else risk being sliced in three. A surge of hollow Ryatsu, and Ichigo's wound healed in moments. Zenai sighed and shook his head. Using Cazador, then. I suppose I should do the same. And with a ripping motion, the Jillian mask materialized over Zenai's face. Hurry up, Ichigo, the Togabito taunted as he vanished once more into the crowd of illusions. I'm charging a Zero, and I'll start targeting the Vizard unless you can stop me. DMN it. Ichigo cursed, extending his senses to find Zenai, but failing miserably. With the ghosts keeping him from seeing him normally, Ichigo could either search aimlessly and hope to stumble across the BSTRD, or focus on breaking the hold Asahi no Kagami had on him. Think, Ichigo, think. Byakuya asking what makes me so special, Urahara asking why he trained me, Yoruchi questioning my intelligence, and me questioning my humanity. What do they have in common? What emotions did they evoke? Well, the last question was easy enough. A deep sense of unease, of doubt. They forced him to face the questions about how his own. Wait. Could that be it? Was it really that simple? I acknowledge that I don't have the answers to any of those questions, Ichigo stated calmly even as he began charging a zero at the tip of the white Tensa Zangetsu. The concept you're using, Asahi no Kagami, is self-worth. And just like that, the ghosts vanished. Ichigo raised the white Tensa Zangetsu at Zenai, who stared right back at him with a matching zero at the tip of Zangetsu. Zero, they cried out in unison. The beams fought for supremacy for a few moments, before both exploded. But neither Ichigo nor Zenai were watching them, instead, they were deadlocked, their blades pressing against their opponents, with apparently equal strength between them. So, you figured it out. Good. Asahi tells me that particular concept is one favored by hell. Ichigo's eyes narrowed. That explained why Zenai had used it, just more preparation for the final fight. You'll forgive me if I kill you quickly. You can try. We're not over yet, not even close. A Getsuga flowed down Zenai's Zangetsu, and Ichigo skid back several feet before shunting it upwards. Asahi no Kagami can project up to 4 concepts before it needs time to recharge. Now, what concept to use now? Ichigo repressed the urge to groan. So I just have to kill you before you can send another wave of freaking illusions at me. Fine. Getsuga Tensho. The Getsuga flew at insane speeds at Zenai, who seemed surprised enough to stand still. But when the black crescent hit him, it vanished. What? Ichigo gaped. What just happened? Zenai tapped the armor that hell had given him. It's not that I was too shocked to move. It's that I didn't need to. This armor was formed from hell's power, and given to me to counter your power. How? Heh. It's stupid to tell your opponent how your moves work, Ichigo. Figure it out yourself. Behind the mask, Ichigo narrowed his eyes and flickered into Shunpa. Zenai wordlessly did the same, and they met in the middle, blades clashing, each struggling to gain the upper hand. Meanwhile, Gingo and Ulquiorra were fighting hand-to-hand in their unreleased forms, seemingly on equal ground. You have grown stronger, Ulquiorra acknowledged as he tilted his head away from a blindingly fast jab. Is this hell's doing? Part him, part me, Gingo admitted, jumping back to avoid a strike that could have opened a new hollow hole in his chest. It doesn't matter, though. As long as I have the strength to win. Foolish. As the former Sexta Espada launched a kick, Ulquiorra grabbed his opponent's leg and threw him at high speed into a sand dune. Once more, you are a mere marionette, a puppet in hell's hands, a card in his deck. You are being used. Gingo emerged from the dune, his expression outraged, as he charged a zero at the tips of his fingers, chains dangling from his wrists. I am no one's puppet. And with that, he released the blue zero. Ulquiorra sonido ed out of the way just in time. You are a puppet, he repeated. You have bought this power with your freedom, Gingo. I can hear the chains that bind you to hell. You have even less chance of betraying your new master than you had your old one. You are now nothing more than a panther on a leash. Gingo scowled angrily. You always were too perceptive. But I will succeed in betraying hell. With this power, I will eat you, then Kurosaki Ichigo. With that power, I'll be able to escape hell and rule Hueco Mundo. Humph. Then it falls to me to send you back to your master. Ulquiorra drew his sword. Bind, Murcielago. The blue-haired Arankar grinned. I'm glad you're taking this seriously. It would be a shame for our final fight to be boring. Grind, Pantera. A moment later, Ulquiorra took to the air, using his bat-like wings to hover a distance away from his opponent as he generated a green javelin in his hands. Immediately, he hurled it at Grimmjow, who was dashing across the desert sand at high speed. Grimmjow dodged easily, maintaining his course towards Ulquiorra, but he found it harder to get away when a Ciro Oscura screamed towards him. Grimmjow leapt above the Ciro, but was blindsided by the lance that Ulquiorra had hidden behind the Ciro, which sent the jaguar tumbling. Growling, Grimmjow landed on all fours and roared loudly at Ulquiorra, sending shockwaves at his enemy. Taken by surprise, Ulquiorra stumbled in midair. He recovered an instant later, but in that instant Grimmjow had Sonidoed right in front of him, his left claw already moving to take a chunk out of him. Ulquiorra leaned back and deflected Grimmjow's strike with his right arm, which was immediately severed from just below his elbow. Ulquiorra Sonidoed a fair distance away, his eyes calculating. He had not expected Grimmjow's strength and speed to have improved that much from Hell's empowerment. Before, his hierro would have easily prevented any significant damage from the former Sexta Espada. For him to cut through now. I see. He murmured. Ha! Grimmjow crowed. You can't even keep up. You are, once again, incorrect, Grimmjow, Ulquiorra denied. I merely underestimated you. It will not happen again. With a little focus, his arm regenerated, and he flexed it experimentally before flaring his power intensely, blanketing himself with green and black Ryatsu. Resurrección, segunda etapa. Grimmjow stared disbelievingly at Ulquiorra's new form. What the flying F-, he demanded, fear creeping into his voice. You have 2 Resurrección forms. Did you go easy on Kurosaki or something? No. He merely showed me more power than he did you, Ulquiorra replied calmly. This is my form of true despair, Grimmjow Jagerjax. His eyes looked carelessly upon Grimmjow. It seems you cannot completely reject the despair my Ryatsu presses upon you. Can you even fight like this? Grimmjow felt his anger rising as he felt the sting of being judged and found wanting. He shoved away any sense of fear. What had he to lose? If he died, then he would simply resurrect in hell. More than that, he growled. I can win. Then don't let your guard down for even a second, Grimmjow. F-. Grimmjow reflexively Sonidoed away, narrowly avoiding Ulquiorra's bat-like claws, and then again when his opponent began to chase him. He's fast. I gotta slow him down. With some focus, Grimmjow called on the chains of hell. The chains at Grimmjow's wrists lashed out, and the Arankar was gratified to see Ulquiorra leap back to avoid the chains. Thinking quickly, he made a small cut in his hand and began to charge a Ciro, which quickly became a Gran Rey Ciro as the blood mixed. Grimmjow needed some serious firepower to take down someone with 2 Resurrección forms. Although I never doubted Ulquiorra's power, he privately admitted. Continuing to chase Ulquiorra with his chains, Grimmjow took careful aim and fired, the gigantic beam obscuring his vision of his opponent for a few seconds. Then the Gran Rey Ciro faded, and Grimmjow frowned. Ulquiorra shouldn't have completely disintegrated in that shot. Grimmjow's head fell to the ground, and behind him, Ulquiorra silently dispelled the lance he'd used to do it. You were too arrogant, he criticized the corpse, unsure if Grimmjow could hear him. Speed and regeneration are my specialties, but I do not lack the power to pierce your hierro. You lost the minute you decided to stand still. With that, a small portal appeared under Grimmjow, taking his body and soul back to hell. As soon as the portal closed, Ulquiorra turned his eyes towards the remaining fights. Returning to his pre-resurrection state, he Sonidoed to a good vantage point and watched. There could be something tactically useful for his king later, so he needed to observe carefully. And that's the end of this chapter. A little intense there towards the end. Karin's having trouble controlling her power, and both sisters envious of the other. I do hope she asks for help soon if she can't get a grip on her power. And wow, deep look into her motivations. Let's face it, Ichigo's been her role model. Who else could have been? Her father's personality was the polar opposite of Karin's. Unfortunately, that's biting her in the butt a bit, since she hasn't been forced to abandon her pride. And speaking of Ichigo. Another look at the questions that Ichigo tries to ignore. He's not unintelligent. He's thought of them before, but they invoke uneasy feelings, so he tries to ignore them and follow his heart. At least now we know how to dispel Asahi no Kagami. Thanks, Zenai, for sharing. Ulquiorra curb stomps Grimmjow, as we all knew would happen, but Grimmjow puts up more of a fight than expected. Let's hope he doesn't come back a lot stronger. Anyway, moving on to the spoiler rant. Chapter 69, Exploration of Power. Blades flashed almost too fast for Ichigo to see as he and his hell counterpart warred against each other. Neither was giving an inch, and though Ichigo's arms tired, he refused to let such a thing slow him down. In unison, they leapt backwards and swung with their respective blades. Getsuga Tensho. Ichigo's black and red Getsuga roared forward from Tensa Zangetsu, meeting Zen's red and white that had come from his Zangetsu. But there was no time to wait and watch to see which one. Zenai had once again lunged for him from the side, forcing Ichigo to match swords once more. You can't beat me that way, Ichigo. Zenai taunted. Even if you do overpower my Getsuga, my armor will simply absorb yours. Behind his mask, Ichigo scowled. It was true, twice now he'd tried to carve Zenai in twain with a Getsuga, and twice the armor had apparently absorbed it. Ichigo had suspected that the armor absorbed the Ryuryoku behind energy attacks. That would render Kido nearly useless, except that Zenai had dodged Ichigo's Heido 4, Byakurai earlier. But Ichigo still had precious little time to think on it, so he shoved Zenai away, trying to buy a little time to come up with a strategy. Strangely, Zenai didn't fight it, and instead landed lightly on the desert sands, holding up Asahi no Kagami. Here we go. How's this? And yet again, ghosts materialized all around Ichigo, who groaned in frustration. Another set of illusions, he complained, carefully observing, waiting for Zenai's surprise attack. But he wouldn't be able to dispel the ghosts until he'd worked out what concept they were using, and that meant listening to them. Surprisingly, it was a reflection of Kenpachi who first approached Ichigo. There's something I don't understand, he admitted. I'm pretty DMN strong, I know that. Wouldn't have been able to become Taicho if I wasn't. And I was kicking your scrawny butt for a while, before you powered up out of nowhere. What happened? Ichigo blinked. An easy question. Before, I wasn't really working with my Zanpakuto, he admitted. I was trying to fight by myself. But when you cut me down, Zangetsu gave me an object lesson on working together, and together we could match you. Kenpachi scratched his chin contemplatively. But if a Zanpakuto is part of a Shinigami, then weren't you still fighting by yourself, in the end? Ichigo grimaced. Sort of, but not really. Zangetsu is part of me, yes. But he's also my sword. If you and your sword don't work together, you'll just hurt each other. Kenpachi grinned as though ready to pounce. Working together makes you stronger. So why do you always fight alone? Ichigo stiffened before Shunpai away from a Zero blast that screamed through the air where he'd been a split second before. Naturally, Kenpachi followed him. You're always alone, Kenpachi continued. In almost every major fight you're in, you fight alone. You fought me alone. You fought alone against Byakuya. You fought alone against Aizen. You're fighting yourself alone, which to me sounds like an exercise in stupidity, but hey, who am I to judge? I don't always fight alone. I worked with Renji to try to take down Aizen in Soul Society. I set up a plan with the Taicho to kill Aizen in the living world. And I got a bunch of people to invade hell with me, Ichigo pointed out. Only because you had no choice, a ghostly Rukia shrieked in his face. Given the choice, you'd always fight alone. You would rather hide your problems and deal with them alone, instead of getting the help you need. You only asked for Kido training because there was no way to learn by yourself. You completely reject the idea of becoming part of the Godai 13, a transparent Yamamoto rumbled lowly. You will one day join us. You know this. So why did you turn Kyoraku Taicho down, when he offered the protection that comes with being a Taicho of the Godai 13? Ichigo's father, dressed in his everyday clothes, casually strolled up to him. How many times did I offer to help with those gangs, to help in any part of your life? I am your father, but no, you had to deal with things alone. Why? When your mother was kidnapped, you left alone to save her, Rukia pointed out. Why didn't you ask us to help? Why did you have to go alone? Because I had my pride, DMN it. Ichigo replied, losing his temper. I couldn't stand needing anyone's help. I didn't want to be that little boy again, I didn't want to depend on anyone. If I could stand alone, then that proved that I'd grown stronger. If I could stand alone, then I'd know that I wouldn't be completely useless again, that I could protect the ones I care about. If I could stand alone, that meant that no one else would get hurt. What about me? A vision of Chad demanded quietly. Did you not depend on me? Was I just a tool, then? Ichigo's heart skipped a beat as he tried to process. I. He swallowed. I saw myself in you, he admitted. We were both strong people ganged up on because of our unusual appearances. And when I saved you, and you explained that you'd taken an oath not to fight for your own sake, it reminded me of my own desire to protect others. That's why I suggested we promise to always have each other's back. I did depend on you, Chad. I still do. You're my best friend, and I know you'll never let me down. I trust you. And with that, it dawned on him. Trust. He whispered. Yes, Kurosaki, a ghost of Ishida Yuryu stated coolly. Trust. I can understand not trusting the Godai, but why are you so unable to trust your Nakama to fight with you? Orihime, Sato-san, even myself. We never fight together. Are you afraid we'll hold you back? Ichigo winced, then had to shunpa out of the way of an incoming Getsuga. If he was honest with himself, then yes, part of the reason he never fought alongside his friends was because he was afraid of them holding him back in battle. But another part. I'm more afraid of getting you guys caught in the crossfire. I'm strong enough to crush mountains with a mere swing of my sword. I've destroyed thousands of Kushinaga in one zero blast. How am I supposed to make sure you guys don't get hurt? I'd rather you not be nearby when I go all out. You don't trust us, Kurosaki-kun. We're strong too, Inoue pointed out lightly. Why can't you trust us to take care of ourselves in a fight? I do. Ichigo insisted. If I didn't, then I would have dragged you all to Hueco Mundo with me so I could protect you. You just can't trust us for fights that you're in, right? Inoue finished sadly. So why haven't you talked to us about it? Don't you trust us at least that much? Why can't you let us make our own decisions? Tatsuki appeared and stood next to her best friend, Inoue. When I wanted to join, you showed me the kind of power you were fighting against, and forced me to acknowledge that I wasn't strong enough. You showed me that much trust and respect, to let me see the truth of the things. Why can't you do the same for your other friends? Ichigo had to fight hard to resist hanging his head in shame. You're right, he admitted. They deserve to know the truth. I trust them, and I'll apologize when I get a chance. If we can work it out, I could use the help. It wouldn't be the first time I've abandoned a protector's pride. Something in those words felt right, giving the same sense of meaning as those other phrases had. The ghosts vanished, leaving Ichigo and Zenai watching each other carefully. I honestly wasn't expecting you to dispel that one, Zenai admitted. It was tricky, Ichigo agreed. Pride and trust. Another of Hell's favorites, Zenai explained. He can use two concepts at once, and those two tend to complement each other, because pride gets in the way of trust. Ichigo looked at his opponent critically. There's more to it than that, he observed calmly. You wanted me to. Look, it keeps us from rejoining. What's left of my pride has trouble accepting that I could go to hell after everything I've done. And I have trouble trusting you because I know how much time you spend with my enemy. Zenai reached up and removed his mask, giving Ichigo a good look at his face. You're acknowledging your feelings, even without Asahi no Kagami forcing you to. That's good. Maybe there's hope for us after all. Ichigo began to power down as well, allowing his Ajucha's mask to crumble off his face. I would hope so, Zenai. After all, you're my emotions, right? All of them, good and bad. It'd be bad if I couldn't acknowledge my own feelings. Zenai smiled. Getting a lot warmer, Ichigo. But too vague. You're missing the most important part. And what's that? Zenai laughed. Ha! Nice try. You'll have to figure it out yourself, but here's a hint, what would push you to commit evil? Ichigo frowned, but nodded. I suppose you need me to kill you now? Yep. Looks like you win for now. I've used all four concepts, so Asahi no Kagami needs to recharge. And we both know that if you'd gone Resurrection, you would have beaten me before I could send out the last two. Besides, you can tell, Grimmjow's dead already, and the Vizard are making short work of that army. Zenai glanced that way and whistled lowly. Wow, they're really taking them apart. Should have guessed that, considering that they were all pretty strong as Shinigami. Only makes sense that they're that strong as hollows. Ichigo stepped up to Zenai, holding Tensa Zangetsu tightly. Are you ready? The smile on Zenai's face softened just a bit. Having trouble killing me, Ichigo? You certainly had no problem last time, and you never showed hesitation against Cazador. That was before I really began to understand that you were part of me, Ichigo admitted. And I finished Cazador because I knew he wouldn't give up until I had. You're not out to kill me. You're trying to make me learn more about myself, and by proxy you. Zenai gave a slight nod, accepting the point. On a more serious note, you do realize that it's necessary for me to push you like this, right? The only real defense against Asahi no Kagami is to know yourself, and you won't have a prayer of beating hell if you can't acknowledge who you are and how you feel. Ichigo took a deep breath and nodded. Yeah. I get it. Then a thought occurred to him. Does this have something to do with those dreams? Reaching enlightenment and bringing out the world of my heart. Zenai practically jumped and stared accusingly at Hell's Zanpakuto. Whoa. Asahi, what was that about? To Ichigo, he clarified, she just cackled directly in my head. I have no idea what you're talking about, Ichigo, but I bet anything she does. He paused. And she's refusing to tell me anything. Figures. Ichigo smothered the urge to chuckle at his counterpart's expense. We should probably get on with it, he finally said. Yeah. Just get it over with. Zenai offered Ichigo a smirk. We'll see each other soon enough. Nodding, Ichigo hardened his heart and resolve. With a single swing, he decapitated his opponent, and watched as the hell portal sekked his corpse away. Then he turned and looked towards the Vizard, considering whether to join them. After a few moments, he shook his head and turned away, starting to walk back to Las Noches. He had much to think about. Kairaku Shunsui rarely had cause to visit the Kido Corps, but more and more he found that his thoughts were centered there. There was so much going on, so many contingencies being planned and prepared. Yamaji was training, reacquainting himself with the highest of seals that he knew. Kuratsuchi was incredibly busy between helping Urahara shift the Dangai, and preparing a number of possible anti-Tagabido devices. Kenpachi was training Madarame personally. Soifun was working on increasing her Ryuryoku reserves, presumably so she could fire her Bankai in succession when it came time to invade Hell. Kamamura was much the same, working on his speed and Ryuryoku. Amagai was preparing his Tagabito capture team, and Shunsui had to admit, while he'd seen better teams, he'd see far worse as well. They were well balanced and were well on their way to becoming great. In another century or two, they could be as close-knit as he and Jushiro were, or Kurosaki Ichigo and his companions. While they were all well and good, Shunsui couldn't help but think that the Kido Corps had the best chance of success in creating a permanent solution against Hell. Even if Yamaji and Ichigo-kun worked together, which Shunsui privately felt would happen only if it were absolutely necessary, Hell could not be killed permanently. He had to be sealed, and if it took the Reo using an unknown method to shatter Hell's soul, then it would probably take the same or better this time. And unless Yamaji was hiding that monster of a forbidden Kido in his beard, it would need to be reinvented. Hence, the Kido Corps. Naturally, even the knowledge that Soul Society was researching the subject would be incredibly damning. As a result, only the Taicho and Fukuteicho of the Kido Corps had been consulted, and so they were the ones trying to develop the technique, though allowances would be made if they needed to consult with other knowledgeable members. And while he knew developing a new Kido took time they didn't have, Shunsui couldn't help but go check on them, at least to determine if they knew how much time it would take. Shunsui strode purposefully to a large white building in the center of the area claimed by the Kido Corps. Similarly to much of the Godiai 13, the Kido Corps had subdivisions that focused on different branches of Kido. However, unlike the Godiai 13, each subdivision only had 4 tiers of similarly skilled members. If Shunsui could remember correctly, those tiers were apprentice, journeyman, master, and sage. In any case, each subdivision had its own building, with all the structures forming a circle. Any Kido Corps member could go to any of the other subdivisions to learn. In fact, they were encouraged to do so upon joining, as combining the principles of many different kinds of Kido tended to create new spells, or modify existing ones in a beneficial way. So one could be master of a branch of Bakudo, but only an apprentice at fire-oriented Heido spells, for instance. Shunsui passed one of the buildings he himself had studied at, a small smile coming unbidden to his face from the moment of recollection. The Kido Corps worked closely with the Godiai 13, and every Fukuteicho class Shinigami with proficiency in Kido was approached by the Kido Corps and offered a chance to learn. As Shunsui understood it, it was a mutually beneficial arrangement. The Shinigami in the Godiai 13 were given an opportunity to grow stronger, while the Kido Corps gained access to someone with a great deal of experience and power to test their spells and provide valuable feedback and ideas for new spells. Shunsui sighed, lost in memory. Lisa had been so close to being extended an invitation from the Kido Corps before Aizen had hollowified her. He was sure that his old Fukuteicho's dream of combining Kido and Zenjutsu could have become a reality given a chance. Who knows? Maybe it still would. Lisa was young yet, and if all turned out well, the Vizard might be re-accepted into the Godiai someday. Sighing once more, Shunsui refocused on the present just as he was approaching the doors. This was the one building no one lacking the rank of sage could enter without XPLCT permission from the Taicho. Under normal circumstances, Shunsui would never have been allowed in, but Yamamoto and the Taicho of the Kido Corps had jointly decided that he would be allowed for the duration of the Hell crisis. He knocked twice, and after a few moments, the door opened, revealing a person covered almost entirely in black and gray fabric, leaving only his blue eyes and pale hands visible. Kairaka Taicho, he greeted. Come in. Thank you, Sage. Shunsui stepped inside. I have come to see Arakaki Taicho. Is he available? Please wait here. Nodding amicably, Shunsui waited patiently for about 15 minutes, then a half hour. He wasn't insulted by the wait. In his own time studying with the Kido Corps, he'd once had to wait 2 hours for a meeting with a sage, who had unexpectedly had a burst of inspiration concerning one of his projects. And the sage was the one who had summoned him to begin with. But that was the way of things here. The unceasing pursuit of knowledge and mastery of Kido came first. Shunsui had been waiting for nearly 45 minutes when Arakaki Taicho finally arrived. Arakaki Hayato was tall but lean to the point where he could be described as almost skeletal. Despite this, Shunsui could feel from his Ryatsu that he was relatively healthy. His hair was very short, and while normally he was clean-shaven, Shunsui could see some stubble beginning to grow in. Kairaka Taicho, Arakaki greeted him lightly. I presume you've come to check on our progress. Shunsui smiled sadly. I'm afraid so. I apologize, Arakaki Taicho. I fear that you may start to hear too much from me as this situation with hell wears on my nerves. Arakaki waved his hand in dismissal of the idea. Not at all. Come, I have much to tell you. They began walking down a hallway, and Shunsui noticed Arakaki casually make a few hand seals out of the corner of his eye. A pulse of Ryatsu followed a moment later. Shunsui frowned. A silencing barrier, he guessed. Indeed. Also a small-scale ward to alert me of anyone who approaches, so we may truly speak in private. Kairaka Taicho, I must confess, I did not expect to see progress quite this soon, but it seems we have. Shuansue's hopes soared. What sort of progress, he asked, keeping the eagerness out of his voice. You are familiar with Urahara Kisuke, I'm certain. Were you aware that he built a device that allowed him to achieve Bankai in 3 days? I'm familiar with it, yes, Shunsui agreed. Kurosaki Ichigo used it as well. What you may not be familiar are the principles behind such an artifact. It forcibly materializes the spirit of whatever Zanpakuto is stabbed into it. However, the Zanpakuto spirit is part of one's soul. Under normal circumstances, the only one who can force it to materialize is the wielder him or herself. What Urahara Kisuke did, was externally force an artificial splitting of the soul. Arakaki's voice grew more and more excited as he explained. It provides an excellent base to work from. All we should have to do is expand the effect to separate the soul into an uncountable number of pieces, then make the effects permanent. Shunsui could not hide the relieved smile that spread across his face. That's wonderful news. Of course, that leads us to a very dangerous question. Arakaki's voice had sobered, and Shunsui couldn't help but notice the troubled expression. This spell is very, very dangerous. It will almost assuredly utterly destroy any soul that is not sufficiently strong to survive the separation. And even for those souls that survive, there's no telling what will occur to their cycles of reincarnation. If there were ever a spell to be labeled forbidden, this would be it. So I must ask, Kairaka Taicho, do you truly wish this spell to come into existence? Shunsui closed his eyes for a few moments. When he opened them, they were sad but resolute as he met Arakaki's gaze. Yes. But I do not intend this spell to survive. Use your skill in imbuing objects with this spell, and make a dagger that once used, will shatter alongside its victim. After that, may this spell never be seen again. Once the crisis is over, destroy all records of the spell, and make the underlying principles behind Urahara's device forbidden to all but the Taicho of the Kido Corps. Arakaki sighed but nodded. It shall be done. Chad awoke to the sound of his alarm, largely refreshed from his nap. He grunted softly as he lifted himself from his bed and stumbled over to his kitchen. Making a light breakfast, he shook his head to clear the remnants of sleep from his mind, and then sat to eat. Several minutes later, Chad stepped out of his home, took a breath, and forced his mind to focus. In keeping with Yoruchi's rest rotation, he began walking to where he could vaguely sense Ishida. As he got closer, Chad could sense that the Quincy's presence on a nearby rooftop. With a small burst of power, Chad flashed up to join him with his Paso del Viento. Ishida was sitting, eyes closed, and visibly tired. Chad would almost mistake him for being asleep, except that he could feel Ishida's Ryatsu permeating the air around him and more strongly than when Ishida was relaxed. And Chad could almost make out, ribbons. What are you doing? He asked curiously, stepping closer. Yes, they were definitely ribbons. I'm monitoring the area through Ryuraku, Ishida explained, opening his eyes. Through concentration and a little energy, Quincy and Shinigami can join the spiritual and visual senses, enabling them to see the Ryoryoku in the air around them in the form of ribbons. A ribbon's color determines the species of the Ryoryoku's owner, and a skilled user can use the ribbon to determine the spirit's location. Humans, including Quincy, are white. Shinigami are red. Hollows are black. Togabito are, strangely enough, purple. That sounds very useful, Chad commented. Could you teach me? Ishida stood and brushed himself off. If even Kurosaki with his complete lack of anything resembling control could do it before he could even sense hollows, I'm certain you can as well. He was proven right when less than 3 minutes later, Chad was looking interestedly at the Ryoraku that waved in the air gently. Does it feel weird when I touch your ribbon? Chad asked, reaching for but stopping just short of the ribbon that he could sense was Ishida's. No. Remember that the ribbon is simply visualization. When you grab the ribbon with your hands, what you are truly doing is grasping Ryoryoku in the air, Ishida lectured. Its only real use is tracking. By holding the ribbon, you can follow its path with your spiritual sense all the way back to its origin, the owner of the Ryoryoku. Chad nodded and let the ribbons fade from his sight just in time for Inoue to arrive, carrying a basket in her arm. Oh. Sato-kun. I didn't realize you'd already arrived. Yuryu, are you alright? I'm sorry I couldn't stay any longer. I'm tired, but otherwise fine. And don't worry about it, Ishida assured her. Here, I was just teaching Sato how to use Ryoraku. Would you like to learn? Sure. It took her a bit longer, perhaps 10 minutes, but Inoue was able to grasp the technique just the same. It seems this technique is not restricted to merely Shinigami and Quincy, Ishida mused. In any case, I'm going to rest. I hope your shift is uneventful. The next scheduled Togabito attack is in approximately 20 minutes. And with that, he flickered away with his Hirenkyaku. I never knew Kurosaki-kun and Yuryu could use these. Inoue commented in awe as she reached out and touched a ribbon idly. No wonder they always seem to know exactly where we are. I wonder why he was using them today, though. He probably wanted to know exactly where the Togabito were the minute they arrived, so he could finish them in one strike from a distance, Chad replied quietly, looking up at the sky. There were a few clouds in the sky, but the sun shone brightly, warming his skin. It was hard to believe that hell could invade on a day like this. Inoue's eyes lit up. I could do that. Tsubaki, how far can you travel from me? One of her hairpins began to glow, and Tsubaki emerged, arms crossed across his tiny chest. I can go as far as you like, as long as you have a target and a strong enough will. Inoue smiled happily. Then that's what we'll do. Chad merely nodded, quietly glad that they had a decent plan of action. He pulled out his special coin, the one his abuelo had given him. He hadn't been able to give it much thought since the Togabito had begun coming in waves, but Chad knew that he was close to unlocking its power. Duty. Chad murmured. What's that? Inoue asked, looking at the coin with interest. Chad took a few moments to answer. It's a memento from my grandfather, the man whose arms you restored in Soul Society. It's also a symbol of a promise I made to him many years ago. Inoue's smile dimmed somewhat. Do you mind if I ask? I promise to use my strength to fight only for the sake of others, and never for myself. But, why wouldn't you fight to protect yourself? Inoue asked, not understanding. Chad hesitated, but plunged on regardless. I was a very violent child when I was young. I've always been bigger, stronger than everyone else. I was a bully. After my abuelo accepted a beating as punishment for my actions, he taught me that these arms of mine were given strength for a reason, and that the greatest thing I could do with them is to protect others. And because I had finally learned and taken it to heart, he gave me this coin, so I would always remember. When my abuelo died, I vowed to only fight to protect others. I no longer had the right to protect myself, I had given up that right when I used my strength to hurt them. Wow. I never knew. But wouldn't defending yourself now help you defend others later? Chad nodded. It would. But I treasure this coin, and my vow, far more than I do my own life. Thankfully, Ichigo and I have promised to protect each other, so when I cannot protect myself, he will protect me. And when he cannot protect himself, I will protect him. He looked down at his arms. My right arm embodies my faith in my abuelo's teachings, that my strength is meant to protect. My left arm holds the violence of my past, my will to attack without mercy. Just as my arms are my strength, this coin. Chad trailed off, closing his eyes. The coin. Inoue prompted after a few moments of silence. Chad spent several seconds longer trying to come up with the words. This coin holds my feelings of duty, he finally stated. The sacred promises I've made, both aloud and silent. I must keep them or else risk losing who I am. That is my pride as a man, the pride that my abuelo instilled in me. As if in response to his words, the coin seemed to glow for a brief moment, bright enough for both Chad and Inoue to stare at it. Does your coin do that a lot? Inoue asked. No, that was the most I've seen it do, Chad admitted. The power is there. I think it's just waiting for something. Inoue nodded, before her eyes widened with recollection. I think it's like what Urahara-san said. Our powers awakened when we needed them most, because we cursed our powerlessness with all our hearts. Your coin is waiting for you to truly need it. Chad looked at the coin speculatively. So what you're saying is that it's waiting for a dramatic time. The mood broken, Inoue giggled a little and rubbed the back of her head in an embarrassed manner. Heh, maybe. Chad smiled. I think you're right. It wouldn't be the first time my powers have done that. The true form of my right arm only appeared the moment I needed it to block a zero from Ulquiorra. Really? Inoue giggled again. Well, according to Urahara-san, our powers are reflections of us, right? I guess that means you're a dramatic person. Chad wanted to frown at her, he really did, but he could see the hilarity in it as well. He chuckled, and while neither said anything more as they waited for the inevitable attack, each felt the time they spent was comfortable, downright pleasant compared to what it would have been alone. Ichigo watched as Suki left the training room, pleased with his progress in sealing. He'd gotten far better at the generation and manipulation of his chains, and he was improving on the binding aspect as well. He was beginning to understand Bakudo a lot more than he ever thought he would. It all came down to the way his Ryuryoku interacted with his opponent's body and Ryuryoku. The simpler spells interacted with the opponent in simpler ways. More effective and difficult bindings interacted with the opponent in more complex and numerous ways. And it was surprisingly easy to make his Ryuryoku do what he wanted as long as he was connected to it. As long as he held one end of a chain that had connected to Suki's vents, he found it easy to cast multiple bindings on her. Then again, he mused, he wouldn't have such a luxury when he fought Hell. For one thing, he needed to be able to overwhelm Hell's Ryatsu. Ichigo frowned. How could he train himself to emit more Ryatsu? He knew he'd done it when he was angry, he wasn't blind. He'd seen the Wizard Arankar struggle against the weight of his power. What Ichigo needed someone who could stand against him even then, or maybe a power-up he could hold back as a trump card. His eyes lit up. Ulquiorra. The Arankar materialized next to him in a burst of sonido. I'm here, Kurosaki-sama. Is Resurrection, Segunda Etapa unique only to you? No, Kurosaki-sama. Any Arankar may learn it, but it has some unpleasant prerequisites. Ichigo blinked and looked at him questioningly. What sort of prerequisites? True despair. Ulquiorra looked at him unblinkingly for several seconds. When it was clear that Ichigo needed more information, he merely nodded to himself. I see this will require some clarification. Very well. Kurosaki Ichigo, what exactly is the difference between a hollow and an Arankar? The presence of Shinigami powers, Ichigo answered promptly. While that is a difference, it is not the defining difference, Ulquiorra told him bluntly. The true difference is our masks. The mask of a hollow is formed from the heart it once had as a human. An Arankar is a hollow that has removed parts of its mask and thus has regained parts of its heart. This heart, this humanity, is what allows for Shinigami powers within Arankar. Ichigo nodded slowly. So, Shinigami powers are more of a side effect, then? Yes. But have you ever considered why a hollow would become an Arankar? Before, I would have thought it was to gain power, Ichigo admitted. Maybe they gain some rationality back. Both of those are factors, yes. However, it ties back to how hollows survive. Hollows survive by consuming souls, including other hollows. Upon becoming a Juchas class Minos, however, hollows have a new risk, forever losing their individuality if they regress. Becoming an Arankar removes that risk, and by gaining Shinigami powers, Arankar no longer hunger for souls unless they have used more Ryoryoku than they can recover comfortably. Just as Shinigami do not require sustenance unless they overexert themselves. Ichigo had to admit it, he was impressed. Sounds like a pretty sweet deal. It is, bar one aspect. Hollows are born of despair. In the end, a hollow's entire life is a desperate struggle to survive, to eat and not be eaten. They can never find peace as they might have as humans or Shinigami. But Arankar have some humanity, and now that they are no longer burdened with the necessity of cannibalism, they can find a semblance of peace. I'm not seeing the downside here. Ulquiorra's eyes looked at him sharply, intently. Kurosaki Ichigo, when you have struggled all your life, and finally managed to find contentment, to locate that elusive peace, what do you think happens to your newfound humanity when that peace is taken away and you know that you can never achieve it again? Ichigo's eyes widened. You fall back into despair, he whispered in horror. Ulquiorra nodded. Deeper than ever before. That, Kurosaki Ichigo, is the prerequisite to Segunda Etapa. True despair. In what was perhaps the most human display Ichigo had ever seen the Arankar perform, Ulquiorra slowly placed a hand over Ichigo's chest, where his heart beat strongly. I have sought to understand the human heart for so long because I cannot understand why humans would allow themselves the possibility of so much pain. I cannot understand why losing everything I valued a second time hurts so much more. Chapter 70, Revelations. You have failed. Again. Zenai bowed his head deferentially. Yes, Hell-sama. This is becoming a pattern, Hell observed coldly, his Ryatsu strong enough to threaten sending Zenai to his knees. I must know for certain if you are truly trying to kill him. Give Asahi no Kagami to me. Wordlessly, the Tagabito drew the blade and offered it to Hell, who took it without hesitation. You used all four concepts against him, and you still lost. Hell's Ryatsu grew more intense with accusation. Tell me in your own words what happened. I shall be checking them against Asahi. Yes, Hell-sama. When we began battle, I used the concept of betrayal to shake Ichigo's resolve. He is at his strongest when he is most resolved, so I was attempting to weaken him. It worked, to an extent, but he summoned his hollow's blade and pushed it into Bankai. It compensated for his lack of focus by granting him even faster reflexes and speed. Despite your gift of power, he was able to fight me evenly at that time, until he realized the concept and acknowledged his feelings. Zenai didn't even need to leave anything out this time, surprisingly enough. So, Kurosaki Ichigo has worked out how to dispel the illusions. Hell murmured. Asahi confirms your story so far, and I detect no falsehoods. Continue. It was at that time that he realized that Asahi no Kagami could focus on different concepts, so I activated the second one, the concept of self-worth. He clearly struggled against this one, and I succeeded in stabbing him through his middle. However, he put on his hollow mask then, and regenerated from the injury. I put on my own hollow mask and left him to struggle with his illusions while I charged a powerful enough zero to overwhelm his regeneration, hidden in the illusion so he could not know where I was. Reasonable. Hell's voice was slowly growing less cold. Zenai silently thanked any higher deity that was listening. Continue. I had just finished charging the zero when he succeeded in dispelling the new concept's illusions, and each of us fired a zero at the other before re-engaging in melee combat. After absorbing a few of his Getsuga with your armor to show how useless his fighting was, I activated the third and fourth concepts, pride and trust. 2 at once. Hell's voice was suddenly frigid again. I did not want him to know of that ability. I apologize, Hell-sama. Given how much he had struggled with self-worth, I figured that the combination concept would give me an overwhelming advantage. However, Ichigo must have been training his spiritual sense, as he was consistently able to sense my incoming zero and Getsuga attacks, Shuunpa and G out of the way. After struggling with it for a while, he managed to break the illusion. Zenai pasted his most apologetic look with a shrug. With no concepts remaining, it was only a matter of time. He was using both blades and Bankai and the Ajucha's mask, while I had 2 Shirkai and Gilliam mask. Your armor helped, but it simply wasn't enough. It was only a short time later when he managed to decapitate me. Hell was silent for a few moments, before sighing, letting up on his Ryatsu. I expected as much. You may have realized this by now, but the reason I have been sending you to fight Kurosaki Ichigo is to get a solid grasp of both your abilities and those of your originator. It is inevitable that he and I fight again, and I intend to have every advantage. Your defeat was the most likely scenario, though I would not have complained had you succeeded in killing him. He turned to the side and began to pace, his brows furrowed. That he was so quickly able to identify Asahi no Kagami's nature and successfully deal with those concepts is troubling, he admitted. But not overly so. It plays well into my plans in any case. How so? Zenai asked, disturbed. Had he been playing in Hell's hands the whole time? Hell chuckled, the sound sending shivers up Zenai's arms. Did you think I wouldn't realize you were playing both sides, Zenai? It's the entire reason I lent you Asahi no Kagami to begin with. If he learns and accepts who you are, then he would unwittingly accept my chains as well. His power would be greater if he accepted you naturally rather than having your soul forced together again. Zenai blinked. Why would you want him to be stronger, Hell-sama? Hell outright laughed. Why else? He is to be my weapon. It would be the height of foolishness for me to leave my dimension, but if I intend to conquer Soul Society we must have someone who can fight the Reo himself. He seems the best bet. I see. And he did. Zenai had had no idea he was being used, and he played his part perfectly. Ichigo was closer to understanding him than ever before. Zenai could only pray that Ichigo would still be able to cut his own chains when the time came, or else he'd become Hell's SLV and weapon of mass destruction. Amagai smiled as he sent the Togabito capture team home for the day, pleased with their progress. They were just about ready, and far faster than expected. Hinamori had taken the Kido specialists for individualized training, as Kido was her specialty, leaving Amagai with Daiki and Heiate. Both of them had problems that required significant work. Heiate needed to train his situational awareness, and Daiki needed to improve both his strength and speed. So Amagai had decided to kill 2 birds with 1 stone by having his students fight him. All day, he'd chased his students through Siriidii, forcing them to constantly run away or fight him. Anytime Heiate activated his target technique, Amagai would start using indirect tactics that, more often than not, placed Heiate in an embarrassing situation. The bucket of cold water just above a door was a classic, and one that Heiate had been hit by no less than 3 times until he'd been able to expand his awareness enough to see it in time. Oh, it had been hilarious watching him sputter, sopping wet and having lost the single-minded concentration of his target technique. With Daiki, however, a different strategy was necessary. He would have fit right in with the Onmitsukido, with his preference for Shuunpa and hit-and-run tactics. So, Amagai had decided to train him the same way. While Amagai was playing with Hei 8, Daiki could do anything he wanted, except go more than 50 meters away. Except, at random, Amagai would shunpa and attack Daiki. And if Daiki attacked first and failed to get away in time, his Taicho would hit back. The only way to avoid pain was to get faster at shunpa, so he could slip in and out of Amagai's guard too quickly for retaliation. By the end of it, both Hei 8 and Daiki had been panting, exhausted on the ground. But they'd improved significantly. Hinamori was also rather proud of her students, so Amagai had once again treated them to a meal before sending them home. A black butterfly fluttered down in front of Amagai, distracting him from his good feelings about the day. He allowed it to land and listened for a few moments, and then the butterfly flew away. Amagai sighed. There went any sense of good feelings. Yamamoto had just summoned him to the 1st Division barracks. Best get this over with. With that, he flickered away. Landing gently in front of the barracks, he entered and nodded respectfully at Sasakai Fukatecho before making his way directly to Yamamoto's room. He knocked. Enter. Amagai did so and stood before the seated Sotecho. Yamamoto Sotecho. You summoned me? I did. What is the status of your Togabito capture team? Currently exhausted from training, but I can have them ready to go in a couple of hours if I can have a healer look at them first. Is it time, sir? Nearly. Kuratsuchi Taicho assures me that the Danga manipulation will be complete in a matter of hours. Once it has, your team will go through to support the living world and return here once they have captured a Togabito. Yamamoto's eyes opened just a fraction. There is another reason for your summons. Amagai Taicho, you were seen entering the Kasumiyaji compound recently. I have a request. A request? Amagai's mind whirled. He'd been seen. By whom? And why would Yamamoto consider it important? And why was it a request, instead of an order? Yes. This is not an order, so you may decline if you desire. Yamamoto's face didn't change expression, but what little of his eyes Amagai could see grew sharper. But I must first have you sworn to secrecy. This request goes against the will of the Central 46, but I feel it is necessary to the continued survival of Soul Society. Now Amagai was even more confused. What on earth was Yamamoto talking about? What did the Central 46 have to do with anything? Sotecho. Make your choice, Amagai Taicho. Do you swear to keep this conversation secret, from now until such time as I approve making it known? It only took a second to make the decision. I swear it. Very well. Tell me, have you ever heard of Bakoto? Amagai nearly jumped. As it was, his eyes widened. He knows. Son of a beach, he knows. Yamamoto's eyes fully opened. It is surprising that you have. Tell me, Amagai Taicho, what is it that you know? It's too soon. The Bakoto I have isn't strong enough to suppress his power. And even if it was, he has the support of his Fukatecho in the other room. He cursed himself for not being more careful. Now he couldn't kill that old BSTRD Kumoi for being partially responsible for his father's death. The only thing he could do was tell the truth and hope they didn't discover his own Bakoto. Bakoto are parasitical weapons forged by a secret sect within the Kasumiyaji, he replied dully. They are powered by the Ryuryoku of the wielder, and grow stronger by consuming the wielder until it's capable of influencing his mind. At the end, the wielder is consumed entirely. That explains much. How did you come by this knowledge? Kumoi has a private set of assassins who were equipped with Bakoto. I have seen the results. Yamamoto's eyes narrowed. I see, he said, his voice never changing. Are you aware that they are illegal? Yes. Why did you not report it? There was no point. Now he could not stop the anger in his voice. You already knew of it, Yamamoto Sotecho. After all, you killed my father to cover it up. Yamamoto paused to blink. Your father. Kisaragi. Shinetsu, Amagai bit out, his Ryatsu beginning to flare as the hate rose within him. But Amagai was surprised when Yamamoto seemed to sag a little. Ah. I should have known. Yes, I killed him. But not to cover up the Bakoto. Then why? Amagai was so close to wordlessly releasing his Zanpakuto, but he knew that his fire-type Zanpakuto would do little harm to the wielder of Ryujinjaka. He was hanging on to his control by a thread. Why did you kill him? Yamamoto's eyes closed. The Central 46 refused to investigate the Kasumiyaji. Your father volunteered to infiltrate the Kasumiyaji for me, but he was caught. A Bakoto was forced upon him, and he was then taken over by it and forced to attack me. I burned the Bakoto away, but he suffered fatal burns in the process. The fiery aura that surrounded Amagai suddenly snuffed out. What? He stuttered. But, why didn't you? One spy within my ranks could be excused as a renegade. But if another were caught, the Central 46 would be alerted and the entire Godai 13 punished. At worst, the Kasumiyaji would have hidden their treachery more thoroughly, making it impossible to bring justice to your father's sacrifice. Amagai stepped back, shaking his head. No, you lie. It is the truth. My request was for you to do as your father had done, to infiltrate the Kasumiyaji and bring proof of their crime. I required your secrecy to ensure the Central 46 did not become aware of the operation. Yamamoto's voice was calm, matter-of-fact, even as he stared directly into Amagai's eyes unflinchingly. Hence why it was not an order, I would not force someone to go directly against the Central 46. Amagai took another step back. But, why now, he asked weakly. And why did you choose me if you didn't know I was already involved? I chose now because they are an unwelcome distraction from the true problem, hell. As for why you, if your team is ready, then you would be free to take care of the Kasumiyaji situation. As you were already spotted entering their compound, you seem to be the best opportunity one would have. Amagai's knees felt weak. All those years training and hating Yamamoto, were for a misunderstanding. Are you going to kill me? Amagai asked, his voice stronger and calmer than he had expected. No. Your actions are understandable, and no harm has truly been done. The loss of Kisaragi Shinetsu was painful for us both. If you swear once more to me your loyalty to Soul Society and the Godai 13, then I shall spare your life and allow you the honor of taking the head of the one truly responsible, Komoi. Yes. Komoi was responsible for his father's death. He and his Bakoto were responsible. Amagai knelt before his Soteicho. I so swear. Then rise, Amagai Taicho. Bring me the proof we need. Once you have it, you will publicly avenge Kisaragi Shinetsu. Kon stumbled back into the house, worn out from fighting. Why couldn't he have freaking energy attacks too? It was exhausting when the only weapon he had were his legs. He was just glad that this time, he'd had support. Collapsing on a chair, Kon turned around to the mute companion who had just followed him inside and nodded at him gratefully. Thanks for helping out. Enryu shrugged and made a few nonchalant hand gestures. Just part of the job. Kon guessed. Enryu nodded. Well, job or not, I'm glad you were there. That Shikai of yours is really something. I would have had a lot more trouble if you hadn't been able to trap those Tagabito and block their attacks with those giant hand things. Enryu smiled, but then made several motions towards another room. You need to check on the princess. Go for it, I'll see you when it's our shift again. Kon stretched out in the chair as Enryu left the room. It was good to get off his feet, his legs ached from overusing his mod soul leg enhancement powers. Even so, Kon was glad he could help out. Kon looked up at the ceiling, unwittingly mimicking Ichigo's own tendencies to stare upwards as he pondered. If he ignored the whole hell situation, then his current life was more than he could have hoped for. He had an understanding family who knew exactly what and who he was. He was trusted, and loved. The only thing he had to worry about, still putting aside the hell situation, of course, was Soul Society learning what he was. And while that was still a concern, it was much less of one than it was before Isshin and the Kasumiyaji people had applied a number of supernatural defenses. Kon smiled. It was a much better life than he'd originally thought he'd have, when he'd first luckily escaped the mass extermination of mod souls. Kon, a quiet voice asked hesitantly. The mod soul, startled from his thoughts, looked at the girl who had addressed him. It was Karin, and she looked rather troubled. Karin? What's wrong? Karin's face twisted in a form of exasperation. It's that obvious. Well, when you're making a face like that it is, Kon retorted. So what's up? Karin sighed. Can you keep a secret? Kon fought the urge to laugh. Karin, my own existence is secret from pretty much everyone. Who would I tell? Yuzu. Ichigo. Dad, Karin said shortly. I don't want anyone to know. Not even them. Kon's smile slowly faded. That's serious? More embarrassing, really, Karin admitted. But I really want to keep this private. Kon looked at her seriously, then gave a short nod. I won't tell anyone. So what is it? In response, Karin activated her eyes, which suddenly became a solid white, erasing any hint of an iris. Kon nearly tipped the chair over backwards in surprise, but recovered a few seconds later. Karin, what sort of power is that? He demanded. I call them the eyes of the oracle, Karin answered, grimacing. Kon watched as her eyes slowly went back to normal. When I use them, I can see things about a person. I know things I shouldn't be able to know, see things that I shouldn't be able to see. Like just now, I could see that your real form is a little green pill, that Kon was a name my brother gave you. I could see that you've been afraid for a long time but you're finally allowing yourself to hope. Kon swallowed. That's a bit of a scary power, he confessed. A little, Karin agreed softly. But I'm having trouble keeping it turned off. It's trying to stay constantly active. Yeah. And since you're the only one I know whose powers directly affect your own body, besides Sato-san, but I can't leave the house so. Karin trailed off. I get it. You want to know how I control it. Kon leaned back in the chair, trying to find the words. Who would have thought a human would approach an artificial soul for help? The Kurosaki family truly was a weird bunch. But he wouldn't have it any other way. This needs a bit of background. You up for a bit of a lecture? Karin sighed, resigning herself to it. If it helps. All right. That power in your body is known as Ryu-ryoku, and everybody has a different amount of it. But Ryu-ryoku reacts to emotions, strong and weak. A Shinigami is stronger when he has a strong emotion like determination and resolve helping the Ryu-ryoku flow. Like Ichigo. Kon nodded. Like Ichigo. But a Shinigami loses strength and control over his powers when he is plagued by doubts, uncertainty, or other kinds of emotional instability. He smiled. Your problem, Karin, is that you are unstable. You resent being helpless. You hate being confined in this house, forced to wait for someone else to save the day while you can do absolutely nothing to help. And while you understand it here, Kon tapped Karin's forehead with 2 fingers. You can't help but want to prove them wrong here. He moved his hand to tap her chest where her heart was. How? Karin whispered, stepping away with wide eyes. How can you know that? I don't need fancy eyes to tell me how you're feeling, Karin. Kon smiled sadly, withdrawing his hand. I felt the same way when Rukia was taken by Soul Society to be executed for giving Ichigo her powers. He was silent for a few moments, then took a deep breath and soldiered on. Anyway, Karin. That strong desire, that constant sense of indignation you feel, that quiet resentment you nurture, all of that is making your Ryu-ryoku very, what's a good word, reactive. When you're calm and focused, you're able to suppress your power, but when you're frustrated or curious enough to let your control slip. Karin understood. Then my power activates. So what do I do in order to fix it? Khan shook his head. You need to resolve the emotions that are making your power so reactive, or practice your control so you can control it even then. Karin bit her lip. How did you get over it, in your case? Being useless while Ichigo saved Rukia, I mean. Khan grew very quiet. I eventually realized how selfish I was being, he finally told her, so quiet that she had to lean in to hear him. He had entrusted me with his body while going to save her, so I was here, with his family, for days. And one day, while I was watching over his sisters, I thought to myself, if he never comes back, then he's going to make his sisters cry. It was then that I realized just how much he had to lose, how much he had risked. I, who had no family, no friends, no one to come back to. I didn't really have much of a life anyway. I would have happily risked it for Kachiki Rukia, because she saw me as a person. But I had forgotten, Ichigo saw me as a person too. An annoying one, but a person nonetheless. He'd beaten me in his own body before, and the Shinigami who had taken Rukia had curb-stomped him. He knew there was no way I would survive Soul Society. Hell, he didn't know if he'd survive, even after Urahara's training. Don't you see, Karin? He gave me his body so if he didn't come back, at least I would be able to live the human life I had always wanted. He gave me his body so I could protect his family if he didn't make it back. Karin's eyes widened, and she stepped back as her hands flew to her mouth in horror. She hadn't made the connection before, when Ichigo had described going to Soul Society to save Rukia, and her brother had glossed over the fights. To think that he'd gone with the knowledge that he could die. Khan's voice lowered again. That realization, the understanding that Ichigo trusted me, with his family, my desire to go to Soul Society and save Rukia myself was selfish. I didn't have the power, but I couldn't begrudge the one who did, not when he was giving his all to fulfill our wish, not when he had entrusted his own wish to me. He turned suddenly piercing eyes towards Karin, as sharp as any gaze that Ichigo had given her. This is the world we live in, Karin. This is what it means to live with one foot in the world of spirits. Your brother was thrown into it without warning, without preparation, with only just enough training as there was time for, and he's nearly died too many times to count on the way to becoming as strong as he is now. Don't think for a second he's told you about all the close shaves he's had. None of us, not me, not Ichigo, not your father, no one, want you or Yuzu to ever have to go through that. And how am I supposed to get strong enough to protect myself, then? Karin demanded. Do you expect me to rely on them all my life? Of course not, Khan agreed, leaning forward to drive home the point. You need training. But guess what? So do the rest of us. No one was prepared for hell, not even the strongest people in Soul Society. Everyone's working their hardest, so there's no one to spare to train you. And Karin? Before you start thinking of trying to fight them in secret, the difference between the hollows you can handle and the Tagabito is a bridge too long for you to cross at once. You'd die. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. You would die. And then Ichigo and your dad would go absolutely berserk, and attack hell before everyone's ready. And then they'd probably die, and even if they didn't, they'd doubt themselves, question themselves, asking just what they could have done differently. Can you see it now, Karin? Your selfishness. I understand your desire to be out there, making a difference. Believe me, I really do. But you aren't ready, Khan told her bluntly. If you want to grow stronger, strong enough to be respected, strong enough to protect yourself, then master your own power first. Karin scowled at him in a way that was very reminiscent of Ichigo's own expressions, then stormed off. Khan sighed and shook his head. He hoped that Karin would think about his words. You've grown, Khan. Khan turned his head to the side to see Ishin step in from the kitchen. How long have you been there? I was there the whole time. Isshin turned his eyes upstairs to where Karin had stomped away. The eyes of the oracle, huh? Scary indeed. I'm just grateful it's not an offense-based power, or else it might have been even harder to stop her. Yeah. Khan looked at Isshin in concern. Did I go too far? I know I got dark there at the end, and she's still so young. Isshin sighed and plopped down onto the couch. It can't be helped. No one wants to hear the truth when it's unpleasant, but she needed to hear it or else she might actually have tried to fight the Togabito in secret. I just wish hell hadn't woken up. Then we wouldn't be in this mess. Me too. They sat in silence for several minutes, before Khan cleared his throat. Kurosaki-san. Call me Isshin. Or Dad. Or even Old Goat, that's one of Karen's favorites. Isshin smiled. You're part of the family, Khan. There's no need to be formal. Khan had to swallow the lump that had suddenly appeared in his throat. Isshin. Is it going to come down to Ichigo again? I sincerely hope not, Isshin responded, sighing. But no matter what happens, someone has to fight hell, and Ichigo is the most likely candidate unless Yamamoto decides to do it himself. Khan took a deep breath and exhaled loudly, clearly making the wordless sound communicate his exasperation and frustration. Guy just can't catch a break. Isshin nodded with only the slightest hint of bitterness crossing his expression. I just wish there was something I could do to help him, something to take some of the burden off of him. Even if the only thing I could do was talk to him, and listen to him, that'd be something. He shook his head. I'm worried for him. Even if hell were to be handled tonight, and Masaki rescued this instant, I don't think Ichigo would be able to let things be with Soul Society. Would you? Khan asked. She was your wife. And they were responsible for sending her there. Would you really let those who condemned her get away? Isshin's body stilled, and Khan could feel Ryatsu begin to permeate the air as Isshin struggled to control his emotions. I know, he responded tightly. And if it were just me at risk, then there would have been no hesitation at all to go after them and ensure every single one suffers for it. But it's not just me. Isshin took a deep breath and sighed loudly, forcibly relaxing his body. It's Karin, and Yuzu, and Ichigo, and you. As much as I want to take vengeance on those who deserve it, it's not worth risking my family. Masaki wouldn't want me to if it meant that. Ichigo's a smart guy. I think he knows that too. Yeah. I hope so. Ichigo was hunched over his desk in his room, gazing at the words that he had written intently, trying to understand just what they were. My life's purpose has been to protect. I have thrown away a protector's pride. My humanity compels me, Ichigo whispered. Those were the lines that had come to him without warning during his fight with Zenai. What were they? All that Ichigo knew was that even thinking the words raised the hair on his arms and neck. There was a strange power behind them, and though he couldn't explain how he knew, Ichigo knew that the words were important because they described him. No, they defined him. Ichigo could feel that there were several more lines to learn, and the very first of them started with the chilling declaration, I am. I am what? I am human. I am Kurosaki Ichigo. I am Vizard. I am transcendent. He had no idea, and yet when he focused on that feeling, Ichigo felt the words were on the tip of his tongue. It was aggravating how he was so close and yet so far. Ichigo knew that the smart thing was to let the rest come to him naturally in time, just as these lines had come to him when he was focused on fighting Zenai, but he couldn't help the niggling sense of importance and curiosity. Even so, he reluctantly moved away from his desk and flopped on the bed, looking at the ceiling. Ulquiorra's revelation about Segunda Etapa was depressing, really. Ichigo had never thought he would ever feel sorry for the guy, but those last few moments, Ulquiorra had been unable to hide the tortured soul behind his eyes. He had never been able to find real peace again. Ichigo no longer had any desire for Segunda Etapa, seeing that. Instead, he had spent the time practicing his resurrection, with Cazador helping less and less. With Segunda Etapa no longer a viable possibility, Ichigo had briefly considered finding and eating a Vastolord, but ultimately decided against it. He would be ending a Hollow's life for a power boost, and there were so few Vastolord to begin with. Also, that would leave a very bad impression on the remaining Vastolord class Hollows. He'd rather have them fight by his side, or be available to protect Hueco Mundo when he finally left. Of course, if a Vastolord challenged him, then there'd be no reason not to. In any case, Ichigo still hadn't released his power seals. They were still a trump card on their own. And Zenai was ultimately on Ichigo's side. They could fight together against Hell when the time came, or perhaps Ichigo would be a distraction while Zenai got Masaki out of Hell. The Vizard frowned, remembering Zenai's hint. What would drive me to commit evil? No, perhaps the real question is, what would turn me into him, he murmured. What could push Ichigo to become Zenai? Ruthless, relentless, willing to sacrifice anything if it meant achieving his goal. Ichigo closed his eyes, trying to remember the way Zenai had argued with him on their methods. Why do you fight me? I want the same things you do. I want to protect my family, I want to make sure they can't be hurt anymore. How is it perverting our desire to protect Yuzu, and Karin, and Mom, and everyone else if we make a few examples of what happens if you try? Why do you fight your destiny to rule, to protect your family? Don't you want to keep them safe by any means necessary? The Vizard's eyes opened. Zenai wanted to protect, just as Ichigo did. Zenai valued his family, just as Ichigo did. Ichigo understood now. Zenai had told him from the very beginning exactly who and what he was. Now more than ever before, Ichigo knew that Zenai was part of him. He was what Ichigo could become, if he abandoned his morals, his ethics, in pursuit of his goals. There was nothing Zenai would not sacrifice, no one he would not slay, if it meant the people he cared about were safe. Zenai would raise entire dimensions, killing both innocent and guilty alike, if it ensured their well-being. And with a cold chill running down his spine, Ichigo realized that he could not say with absolute certainty that he would not do the same under the right circumstances. It was with a quiet horror that Ichigo finally made the connection, that he finally comprehended just what Zenai was. Zenai was the part of Ichigo that would DMN himself with a smile. He was the part of Ichigo that Ichigo himself would never, could never cut out. Zenai was Ichigo's desire to protect. Chapter 71, Barriers Between People. Ichigo awoke suddenly, breathing in sharply for a few moments while he registered his surroundings once more. Sleep had been a long time coming since the previous night's revelation, and what sleep he did have was interrupted by nightmares. The one he'd just woken from had been rather disturbing. Ichigo massaged his eyes with his knuckles, trying to rid himself of the lingering remnants of the dreams. Rubbing his eyes wasn't enough. Ichigo shook his head, trying to banish the images that had persisted beyond the ending of sleep. He knew why his sleep had been restless. The knowledge that he could go to hell, for acting on something as inherently good as wanting to protect his family. It was a tough idea to swallow. At what point was he supposed to stop? If people continued to threaten his family, was he supposed to just let it happen? His face hardened. No. If it was within his power, he would always protect those he held dear. But, he wouldn't kill the innocent to do it. That was his limit. That was the difference between himself and Zenai. His family wouldn't want their lives to be at the expense of others. If he went to hell anyway, then, well, he'd cross that bridge when he came to it. Hopefully it wouldn't come to that. Determination renewed, Ichigo swiftly dressed and headed to the training area. He would master sealing. He would defeat hell. He would rescue his mother. And he would let nothing stop him. Ichigo stalked into the training area and absently noted that no one was in yet. That was fine, it just gave him some much appreciated privacy while he worked with his sealing. He was getting a lot better at binding, but he still remembered the key principle of seals, they were powered by the sealed. Thus far, he'd never managed to actually guide Suki's power into maintaining any of his own spells. He frowned for a moment. No wonder the masters of sealing were few and far between, he needed a test subject. Don't tell me you've forgotten about us, King. You need to practice your seals in the middle of battle, too, and you owe me a good fight. Silently acknowledging the point, Ichigo sat in a corner of the room and pushed himself into his inner world, opening his eyes to see the current state of his soul. The sun shone bright, almost too bright, but the heat was not comforting. No, this was an intense heat, one that threatened to burn. The metal of the skyscrapers gave off visible haze from the heat. What was causing this? Hot, ain't it? Cazador asked from right behind him. That's your fault. The more single-mindedly focused you are about something, the hotter and brighter it gets. Ah. That made sense, in a way. If someone's focus became too intent, too narrow, it could blind that person to everything else around him and lead to his own destruction. Strange, though, that such a concept would be reflected within his own soul. Even so, Ichigo merely nodded and turned around. Well then, shall we? Cazador smirked and leapt back, drawing his version of Zangetsu. Don't think I'm gonna take it easy on ya. Never crossed my mind. Ichigo drew his Zanpakuto and began gathering his power, shaping his intent. Let's go. Koten Zanshuan. And just like that, another Togabito died. A moment later, the portal back to hell opened and Seked the corpse through. Inoue sat back down and sighed. They just keep coming, she complained. Don't they know it's pointless by now? Chad, who was sitting nearby, shook his head. There's definitely a point. But what could it be? They're not like hollows, they don't need to feed on souls. They're not tiring us out anymore, not since we set up the rest rotation. They're not strong enough to kill us, Inoue pointed out. Her companion fell quiet, and Inoue sighed once more. Her stomach growled audibly, and she blushed. We haven't eaten in a while, she said quietly. I'm going to get something to eat. Do you want anything? Chad blinked and considered for a moment. A couple of tomatoes, please. Inoue smiled brightly. All right, Sato-kun. I'll be back in a few minutes. Chad nodded, declining to comment on Inoue's smile. She was obviously disturbed by the Togabito's apparent suicidal tendencies. He felt similarly, enough time had passed that Hell had to know that this strategy wasn't exhausting them. What possible purpose did Hell have, continuing to send his soldiers here to die? Unless Hell's goal could only be accomplished through the repeated death of Togabito in the living world. He frowned pensively, then tapped his ear. Yoruchi. I'm here, Sato, she responded over the communication device in his ear. What's on your mind? When Shinigami and hollows die, their bodies decompose into erasure, and are incorporated into the environment, right? Yes, the goddess of Flash confirmed. Most of the erasure follows the soul to whatever plane it ends up in, but some is left behind. What about the Togabito? Are they leaving behind erasure when we kill them? That's a very good question. Kisuk. The distracted voice of Urahara questioned. Yoruchi repeated the question. Yes, Togabito leaves some erasure behind, markedly more than hollows do in fact. More? Chad asked. Most of it has to do with the portal that opens every time to reclaim their soul. It opens, and some of the erasure from the hell dimension leaks into the living world. Isn't that dangerous? The gentle giant questioned. Only to those in the immediate area, and only for a very short time, Urahara reassured him. The erasure disperses quickly, integrating with the erasure already present in the living world. Erasure is nothing if not adaptable. Given time, the erasure from the hell dimension will take on the same properties as that from the living world. A terrible idea was beginning to take form within Chad's head. He prayed it wasn't true. But doesn't the living world have less erasure than the other worlds? Oh yes. Hueco Mundo, Soul Society, the Zenai, even hell are all made up completely of erasure. The concentration of erasure in living world is tiny by comparison. Urahara's voice was beginning to sound interested. Why are you asking? Togabito have been coming in every hour, in several places of high erasure content, for more than a day. I don't know how much erasure each Togabito leaves behind when it dies, but that's a lot of Togabito, hitting the same spots over and over. Chad took a breath. Is it possible that instead of the hell erasure taking on the living world's properties, the living world's erasure might start to take on hell's properties? There was dead silence for several seconds, before Chad heard a furious clacking at a keyboard. Neither Yoruchi nor Chad dared to say a word while Urahara worked. A full minute passed, then two, with Urahara muttering about variables and spiritual resonances. Then, finally, they heard a sigh. Yes, Sato-kun. I'm afraid that yes, it is possible, and it is happening. Right now, the effects are nearly unnoticeable, and will reverse themselves given a week or two. But if hell continues to send his Togabito, then eventually the erasure Karakura will completely resonate with the erasure of hell. And what will happen then, Kisuke? Yoruchi snapped. The resonance would allow for the hell dimension to connect to Karakura directly through the weakened dimensional borders. What about the Zenai protection? Chad asked. You're positioning it between hell and the living world to protect us, right? Yes, it will be in place in another few hours. And it will help somewhat, but the effect is countered by the fact that the erasure in Karakura has already begun to take on hell's properties. Explain. Do you have any understanding of inter- and extra-dimensional physics, or the effects of time-space distortion on them? No, Yoruchi admitted reluctantly. How about the mechanics of spiritual resonance? What actually happens when you rip a hole in a dimension? No. Then there's no way any explanation I can give will make any sense to you. You'll just have to trust me. I am forwarding my findings to Soul Society so we can figure out what to do from here in the time we have left. Chad swallowed. What happens when full resonance happens? He asked simply. Well, I'd guess that the gates of hell would materialize here, and never disappear. It'd be a permanent portal between hell and the living world. Togabito would be able to invade unendingly, further accelerating the conversion of the rest of the living world erasure. Eventually, the living world would be subsumed into the rest of the hell dimension. Chad's mouth went dry. How long? Yoruchi asked quietly. Given the rate of conversion and assuming that hell doesn't pick up the pace, approximately 26 hours until full resonance. Just over 1 day. A single day to avert the apocalypse. Chad rubbed his forehead, vaguely registering Inoue's return. A mere 26 hours, and there was absolutely nothing Chad could do to improve their chances. All he could do was sit here and continue to eliminate the Togabito who crossed over into the living world, knowing that with each one they defeated, the world grew that much closer to disaster. Inoue quietly took the tomatoes out of her bag and set their container next to Chad, who absently nodded and thanked her. Then a thought occurred to him. He may not have anything he could do to improve their chances. But she might. Inoue. Oh, I like the way you think, Sato-kun. It's worth a try, Yoruchi agreed. I'm patching her in now. And so Urahara and Yoruchi explained everything. Inoue paled, but nodded at once. I'll try to reject the changes, she promised. You'll have to move quickly, Urahara warned. The erasure spreads out very quickly once the portal vanishes. Right. It was an astonishing thought, that they were relying on her and her alone, not merely for healing those who would save the world, but to actually keep the world safe herself until the source of the problem could be dealt with. She never would have dreamed of it before. I'll do my best. Karin was in a very foul mood. She still couldn't leave the house, she was bored beyond belief, and she was in no mood to be in the company of the spoiled princess who had taken up residence with them. Worst of all, she kept hearing Khan's words from the night before. That strong desire, that constant sense of indignation you feel, that quiet resentment you nurture. You need to resolve the emotions that are making your power so reactive. Can you see it now, Karin? Your selfishness. Karin grit her teeth in frustration. Damn it. She wasn't being selfish. Just because she wanted to be out there helping didn't make her selfish. That was practically the definition of selfless. If she were selfish, then she would be just like that Kasumiyaji girl, who seemed perfectly content to let her personal guards fight on her behalf with a care in the world. If she were selfish, then she wouldn't mind knowing that she didn't have to fight, that she didn't have to go to school or anything. Karin resisted the urge to kick a wall in frustration. She was making herself angrier, which was practically the opposite of Khan's advice, and sure enough she could feel her Ryoryoku trying to activate her eyes again. She took a deep breath. And let it out slowly, trying to calm down. Are you well? Just what she needed. Karin turned around to see the blonde girl, Kasumiyaji Rurikayo, looking at her with mild concern. I'm fine. Rurikayo looked at her, clearly not believing her. Something is clearly bothering you. Tell us. It's nothing that concerns you. Karin was struggling now to control her anger. The sight of Rurikayo had been irritating the night before, but after her talk with Khan, Karin just couldn't deal with her right then. Very well. We shall leave you to your anger. She turned around and was beginning to walk away when Karin lost the fight with her Ryoryoku. The eyes of the oracle opened. The flash of Ryatsu startled Rurikayo into turning around, and Karin saw the truth. What is that? Rurikayo stuttered. Karin's eyes returned to normal. Karin couldn't muster up the will to be angry anymore, not after having seen Rurikayo for exactly who she was. I'm sorry, she muttered. Rurikayo drew herself up to her full height, which wasn't much, and huffed. Tell us. What did you do? I saw who you are, Karin explained quietly, looking down. My eyes allow me to see the truth of people. I'm sorry. I had no right to look upon you with those eyes. And what did you see? Karin took a deep breath. I saw how you really feel. You can't see how any of this is going to end well. You're scared, and doing your best to hide it by purposely pushing others away. You truly care about your guards, and even now you're hoping that they're still safe. You're under a lot of stress right now and you're trying to stay strong for them so they don't have to worry about you when they go out to fight, she told the heiress softly. It would break you if they failed to come back. You came down here because you couldn't stand staying in your room anymore, because the minute they get home you want to reassure them that you're safe so they can rest. Rurikayo stepped back, a look of shock breaking through the mask. How? How can you know all that about us? My eyes see a lot more than what's on the outside, Rurikayo. I see the truth. Nodding to herself, Karin made a snap decision. I'm sorry for snapping earlier. You're right. I am bothered about something. I'm angry because I'm having trouble controlling my power, and the person I asked for advice told me something I didn't like to hear. He called me selfish. The change in subject seemed to have done as intended. The heat in Rurikayo's cheeks dimmed, and while she was still clearly disturbed, she seemed more than willing to remove the focus from herself. Why did he say such a thing? She asked. He said that my problems controlling my power come from my wanting to help the others fight, from resenting being helpless. We see. Rurikayo paused, clearly weighing her words. Then, we must agree. Karin stared at her, not believing her ears. What? We must agree that you are being selfish, Kurosaki Karin. While the desire to become strong is something to admire, there come times where we must trust those with the strength to do what we cannot. I want to help. I don't want to be a burden to them. And yet a burden is exactly what you will be should you try to help. The most you can do is make yourself as small a burden as possible. Karin felt disgusted with herself. How could she have expected this girl to understand? Her eyes had revealed the girl's emotions and motivations, and it had been made very clear that Rurikayo was no fighter at heart. That's the most you can do, Kasumiyaji Rurikayo. Yes, Rurikayo admitted without missing a beat. You have seen our soul, Kurosaki Karin. You know how we worry for Enryu, for Kenryu. Yet if we were to insist on being with them, our presence would only hinder them. Rurikayo's facade cracked a bit, and even without the eyes of the oracle, Karin could see how much it cost her to say that. If it was within our power, we would protect our family. But it is not. The war with hell is not one that can be fought with the power we wield. We must place our hopes in those who do have the power. Those like your brother and his associates. Those like the Gotei, their powers lie in war, Kurosaki Karin, while ours do not. The words echoed within Karin's mind as her eyes widened. Their powers lie in war, ours do not. Perhaps you will have the strength to fight alongside your family in time. Perhaps not. But right now, the only choice you have, the only choice we have, is to believe in those who have the power to fight and do our best to ensure they do not worry for us while they go to war. Rurikayo smiled sadly. If that is all we can do, then that is what we will do. She turned and walked away, leaving Karin alone with her thoughts. It had never occurred to her to worry for Ichigo. Karin had always taken for granted that he would come home, injured, perhaps, but he would always come home. He was so strong. There was no way he wouldn't. Yet Rurikayo worried for her servants, people so strong that they had become her personal guard. It threw a spear of doubt into Karin's beliefs. Hell was strong too, that much was obvious if he'd managed to keep Ichigo from rescuing their mother. What if he? No. She refused to think about it. Karin grimaced as she made her way to the kitchen, looking for something to drink. Still though. Karin understood a bit more now. She wasn't being kept home simply because she was too weak to fight. No. Karin was being kept home because it was the only way Ichigo and their father could focus completely on their own battles. Even if she were strong enough to fight the Togabito, they would have asked her to stay home. Because they loved her, and wanted her to be safe from those with the power to condemn her to hell. Both Ichigo and their father had always taken on the role of family protector. They wanted to protect her. It was a little selfish of them, but Karin understood a bit better now. It had to be hard for the old man, letting Ichigo grow so strong, letting him risk his life over and over again. They just weren't ready to let Karin do the same. Karin felt her heart grow warm and her bitterness abate as the tiniest of smiles graced her face. They didn't think of her as weak. If that was the case, then she could wait a bit longer for them to be ready. In the meantime, she had powers of her own to train. She turned around with a glass of juice in her hand, only to be startled by Yuzu being right there, a confused and hurt expression on her face. Why didn't you tell me? Tell you? What? Why didn't you tell me about your power? About your eyes of the oracle? Neliel watched her students from a distance. The wizard had made good progress in learning how to utilize their hollow powers, and now they didn't really need her anymore, outside of the occasional healing when they accidentally hurt each other. No, Neliel's attention kept wandering over to where Ichigo sat, still and silent, in the corner. What was he doing? His Ryatsu reflected that he was awake, yet, withdrawn, somehow. She could only guess that he had retreated into his inner world to deal with something. Perhaps Cazador de la Luna was acting up. Or maybe Zangetsu had a new technique for him. Yet he'd been there since before she'd arrived in the training room, which was hours ago. Neliel let out a silent sigh. Of all the humans and Shinigami she had met, she had connected most with Ichigo. Sadly, they hadn't been able to spend much time together since that night where they'd shared so much. It was understandable, of course. Ichigo was single-mindedly devoted to protecting his family, and hell was a direct threat. And then there was Zenai, and all the confusion and horror of dealing with an enemy that was born of one's own heart. It would be a miracle if Ichigo got through all this without suffering too much heartbreak. I wonder, is there a kami that would listen to an Arankar's prayers? If there was, Neliel prayed that Ichigo would get through the crisis with his life and mind intact. As if in direct answer to her prayers, Ichigo's eyes suddenly shot open, startling her. He stood and stretched, and then their eyes met. Ichigo's lips twitched into a reassuring smile, one that Neliel found herself returning. Then the wizard jerked his head towards part of the training grounds. He wanted to talk. Or did he need some advice on his training? In any case, Neliel nodded amicably and walked on over, meeting Ichigo halfway. "How are you doing?" Ichigo asked quietly. "Haven't seen you in a while." "I'm doing well, Ichigo. The three you brought along have kept me pretty busy," she admitted. "But they've gone through just about everything I could teach them." "What about you?" "I've been pretty busy too. Learning how to use my chains better and all, and figuring out sealing." Ichigo shook his head. "It's no wonder not many people use it, it's so much more difficult than normal Bakudo, and frankly Kido is not my strong suit." "How's that coming along?" "Oh, very well." For some reason, Ichigo smirked rather smugly for a moment before shaking his head. "I need to test my skills against a few other people though, just to make sure I've got it." The corners of Neliel's lips twitched into a playful smirk. "If you like, I'll be your opponent." "I was hoping you'd agree." He leapt back and drew Zangetsu in a single fluid motion, bringing it to a ready position. "Shall we?" "Eager, are we?" "We'll see who comes out on top soon enough," Neliel teased as she drew her Zanpakuto, Gamuza. A hint of pink touched Ichigo's cheeks for a moment before he rushed at Neliel, and then they began the dance of blades. Zangetsu met Gamuza over and over, but Neliel seemed to refuse to let Ichigo pressure her into a blade lock, instead choosing to deflect to one side or another if she couldn't simply dodge. It was when Neliel nearly gutted him in a counterattack that Ichigo realized that instead of brute strength, she was relying more on sheer skill, trying to take advantage of any opportunities Ichigo gave her. For her part, Neliel eyed her opponent carefully. Ichigo was not someone to take lightly, even with merely his shurikai, he had more power behind his strikes than some of the lower Espada had had. But she had been ranked 3 for a reason, so she was more than capable of matching him in his current state. The question was, when would he use his chains? As if to answer her question, Ichigo avoided another counterslash by vanishing in a flicker of Shuinpa, materializing several feet to Neliel's right side. He raised his left arm and without a word conjured 3 chains that seemed to erupt from within the palm of his hand, lunging for her. Neliel snorted and merely sidestepped the chains, cutting them in half with Gamuza. What she wasn't prepared for, however, was Ichigo stepping into high gear, Shuinpa over and over again, not standing in any one place for more than a split second. It happened in an instant. She felt chains hit her in the back and they wrapped around her tightly, binding even her hands to her sides. She felt a strong, too strong, Ryuryoku enter her body and she was frozen in place, unable to move. Even her Ryuryoku felt sluggish, but she had to break free. "Declare, Gamuza." Light purple Ryatsu erupted around her, and the chains snapped and fell away from her as she assumed her resurrection form, a centaur, with white spalders, elbow guards and gauntlets. She hefted her lance and smiled at Ichigo, who she thought looked slightly impressed. "Were you expecting something else?" she commented lightly. "Honestly, I should have guessed," Ichigo admitted. "That form suits you. Don't think it's going to stop me, though." Bankai. When his Ryatsu dissipated enough to see, Neliel took sight of his Bankai with interest. His Bankai coat had changed from its solid black to matching the same style as what Ichigo had recently taken to wearing. Apparently Tensa Zangetsu approved. But there was no time to think about such things, as Ichigo had promptly taken a single step and vanished into Shuinpa once again, too quickly for her. It was over before Neliel even knew what was happening. All 4 of her legs had been bound by chains, and she was trapped on the floor, her body frozen, and then Ichigo was in front of her, concentrating on a length of chain that he was holding in his left hand. Neliel's eyes widened when she felt her Ryuryoku respond to a will that wasn't hers, and she saw no more as chains flew before her eyes. Ichigo breathed out, relaxing as he felt his chains accept Nellio's power and use it to cover every inch of her body in overlapping and interlocking chains. Seal complete. He stepped forward and very carefully sliced the chains around Nellio's face so she could see once more. "You alright?" Nellio made a show of trying to move and failing. "You know, I've no problem with it, but people are going to wonder about you if you keep chaining me up in public." This time there was no stopping the blush. Answer, yes. Got it. Can you use your Ryoryoku at all? Asiro? Bala? Anything? Nellio got a thoughtful look on her face, then furrowed her brows in concentration. Not at all. Nicely done, Ichigo. Thanks. You figured it out very fast. What changed? Well, I don't think my way of sealing is really what the Kido masters use. I know Urahara's seal took a lot more subtle approach. Since I'm not exactly the subtle type. No, you are not, Nellio agreed. Ichigo gave her a look, then sighed and continued. I figured I'd try just sending in a bunch of Ryoryoku, diffusing it into yours, and then having my Ryoryoku drag yours into the pattern needed for the seal. Wouldn't you have to have a lot stronger Ryoryoku than your opponent to pull that off? Yeah. Just means I'm going to have to beat hell down until he can't put up enough of a fight. Nellio smiled. She would have shaken her head in amusement, but her neck was still bound by the chains. But she was glad that Ichigo hadn't changed all that much. Mind letting me loose? Ichigo smirked at her. I don't know, I thought you liked being all wrapped in chains. Why don't I show you how much I enjoy them? Nellio whispered enticingly. Ichigo's smirk dropped instantly, and his face was so red Nellio could only laugh. After a few moments, the wizard recovered enough to speak again. I'm going to head to the living world again, get a status update. Maybe get the Kido specialists to test out my seal work, see if they can improve it. Sounds good. Are you going to let me out first? I suppose I should. A few blindingly fast swipes with Tensa Zangetsu later, the chains fell to the ground and disintegrated. Nellio quickly reverted to her usual form, sealing Gamuza. Come back soon, she told him invitingly. And maybe we can play with your chains a bit more then, Ichigo couldn't open a garganta fast enough. He leapt in, hearing Nellio's quiet laugh follow him. He would never understand why all the powerful women in his life insisted on teasing him like that. First Yoruchi, then Nellio. Even Matsumoto tried. He shook his head. To be fair, you're a bit of an easy target. Great, even my hollow agrees. Perhaps if you didn't react quite so vividly. You too, Zangetsu. Several minutes later, a thoroughly disgruntled Ichigo stepped into the underground training ground beneath Urahara's shop, having sealed Zangetsu just to get some peace from the voices in his head. Ichigo. He turned to see Yoruchi call over to him from a fair distance away, waving him over in an urgent manner. Concerned, he shunpaed over to her. Yoruchi. What's wrong? A whole lot more than you know. How's your sealing coming? Pretty good, I think. Not as good as Urahara's or Yamamoto's, but I managed to seal a high-level Arankar just a few minutes ago. Yoruchi let out a breath. Finally, some good news. Listen, Kisuke and Kuratsuchi have just managed to finish shifting the Zenai. We're about to call Soul Society. I hope you're rested. Odds are, the final showdown with Hell will be later today. Ichigo's eyes widened for a moment before his face hardened, and he gave a resolute nod. Then let's go call Soul Society. They briskly walked to the room that Urahara had dedicated for communications with Soul Society. Urahara was busy typing something on his computer, but nodded at Ichigo in acknowledgement of his presence. Shinji was there, presumably representing the wizard, and Ichigo couldn't help but notice the lack of hollow hole and dimmed hollow Ryatsu. He wondered for a moment when he'd taken control, but decided it might be better not to ask. Then there was Ishida, who was walking right towards him. Kurosaki. Ishida. Ichigo glanced around. Where's Chad and Inoue? They're on patrol, the Quincy quickly explained. The Tagabito have been attacking periodically for over a day. Did they invade Hueco Mundo as well? Ichigo frowned. 3 times they sent an army at us, headed by Zenai. Zenai? The me that hell controls. Ah. I take it he lost handily. While the armies were destroyed, I wouldn't say that Zenai really lost, not considering his goal, anyway. Ichigo shook his head. Though you should probably know that Grimmjow's a Tagabito now. Ishida furrowed his brows, trying to remember. He was the Sexta Espada, right? You defeated him handily last time you fought him. Ichigo nodded. Just thought you should know in case he turns up here. Good to know, but you're trying to change the subject. Ishida looked at his transcendent friend critically. What was Zenai's goal? Ichigo sighed. There was no getting out of this one, was there? Reintegration with me. Ishida's eyes narrowed. Is that even possible? Very. He's part of me, and if I know anything about souls, it's that they yearn to be whole. Ishida blinked. He's part of you. That was a very disturbing thought. What part of you could possibly manifest as? His voice died when he saw blackness creeping in at the whites of Ichigo's eyes, as he felt Ichigo's Ryatsu shift and become far more dangerous than it had been mere seconds before. Anyone can become evil. The only question is what circumstances would bring it about. Ichigo took a breath and forced himself to relax. Sorry. It's a bit of a touchy subject at the moment. And why is that, Kurosaki Ichigo? Ichigo stiffened, then slowly turned around. Yamamoto Genryusai Shigekuni's face was on the wide screen, as were all the Taicho remaining in Soul Society. A little warning would have been nice, he muttered. Urahara had the grace to look sheepish. Sorry. It matters little, Yamamoto stated. Urahara Kisuke, we have received your reports concerning Hell's apparent tactics on the living world. Kuratsuchi Taicho, have you seen them? Yes. I've also performed some independent tests to verify the results. It seems that Hell is far cleverer than we gave him credit. Then time is of the essence. Kurosaki Ichigo, it is fortunate that you have returned. What can you tell us about the situation in Hueco Mundo? Ichigo blinked. Yamamoto had, actually asked. Instead of demanding a report. The Arankar that survived our fight with Aizen have taken residence in Las Noches. As the one who killed Aizen, most hollows seem to respect me immensely, which made things a lot easier. I suppose it helped that I have hollow powers. In any case, the Tagabito invaded 3 times, each with a small army led by Zenai, the inner Tagabito we talked about before. Each army was defeated handily, and I have a number of prisoners in Las Noches. Figured it was better to deprive Hell of his infinite army as much as I could. Kairaku Shunsui, who was standing just to Yamamoto's right and behind, smiled at Ichigo and nodded approvingly. That's excellent thinking. Were you able to get anything out of them? Ichigo shook his head negatively. Not much in terms of tactical information. They were barely trained, mostly just in using Hell's chains as weapons and defenses. Many of the ones I talked to expressed a wish to be purified of their sins and sent on to the next life. But since I don't really know how Konso works, I figured I should ask you guys. Would that work if they truly repented, or would it send them straight back to Hell? Ishida swore he saw an unholy light enter Kuratsuchi's eyes. With your permission, Soteicho, I would undertake this research after Hell has been sealed. We shall see, Yamamoto said noncommittally. Kurosaki Ichigo, is Hueco Mundo protected? Ichigo nodded firmly. Very protected. 3 of the Vizard are stationed at Las Noches, along with all the Arankar and a large number of hollows. I'm sure they can handle anything thrown at them short of Hell himself. Although Zenai could give them trouble, I suppose, since he's using both Zangetsu and Hell's Zanpakuto. Yamamoto's eyes opened wide. He's using Asahi no Kagami. Do I want to know how you know its name? Ichigo asked wearily. It's in the records, Yukitake explained helpfully. We only found that reference about a day ago, and we're still not entirely clear on what it does. The transcendent side. Fine, I'll give you the highlights. It's an illusion-type Zanpakuto. The wielder focuses on a concept, usually an emotion, that he wants to overwhelm you with, and illusions from your own mind surround you and use your memories and feelings to break you with that concept. How do you break the illusion? Yukitake asked. You can only do it by figuring out the concept and acknowledging your feelings about the matters brought up by the illusions. Once you know the concept being used, the illusion vanishes. Ichigo shook his head. It's harder than it sounds, especially when they will ask questions designed to make you unsure of yourself. What concepts did Zenai use on you? Amagai asked. Guilt, betrayal, self-worth, pride and trust. Oh. That reminds me. Apparently Asahi no Kagami can only use up to 4 concepts on you before it needs to recharge, Ichigo commented. Adjusting his glasses, Ishida mentally re-evaluated his opinion of Ichigo's emotional maturity, and silently forgave him for his minor outburst earlier. Evidently he'd gone through quite a bit during his stint in Hueco Mundo. Though he knew that Ichigo felt guilty about some things, and that he'd recently acquired perfectly justifiable trust issues with Soul Society, Ishida had had no idea that the substitute Shinigami had problems with his own self-worth. That disturbed him more than he cared to say. That is valuable information. You have my thanks, Kurosaki Ichigo. This time, Ichigo was not the only one to look at Yamamoto strangely. Okay, what changed? Shinji asked bluntly. You don't thank anybody. Yamamoto ignored the question. Instead, he opened his eyes, and met Ichigo's eyes steadily. Kurosaki Ichigo, the Zenai is now stable. The time has come to invade the Hell dimension and seal Hell away. I know there is no point in attempting to prevent you from coming along, not when your mother remains captive there. So I extend you this invitation, join us on our mission to seal Hell away. Should you accept, I vow to you here and now, on the flame of Ryujin Jaka, that so long as you remain an ally of Soul Society, your family will be protected by the Godai 13, in life and in death. Ichigo's breath caught. This was. Was he serious? Seeing Ichigo's speechless state, Yamamoto hid a secret smile. Just as he thought, as long as you protected his family, Kurosaki Ichigo would always stand at your side. You are an ally of the Godai 13, Kurosaki Ichigo. Despite our differences, we each have much to offer the other. You and your companions have done much for us, and we have every reason to believe you will continue to do so. The least we could do is guard the souls of your family. So I ask you once more, Kurosaki Ichigo, shall we work together to save all the realms from hell? There was only one answer Ichigo could give. Let's do this. Chapter 72, Invasion. The meeting moved swiftly after Ichigo accepted Yamamoto's invitation. Ichigo proposed that as the Hell dimension had adverse effects on Shinigami Hollow hybrids, it would probably be best if none of the visitors accompanied him. Shinji had nodded in acknowledgement of the point, but then couldn't help but ask, what about you, Ichigo? Cazador and I have been working on that. We didn't have as much trouble as you guys did anyway, and I think that's because of my previous experience with Resurrection and my higher mastery of hollow powers. But just in case, I'll refrain from hollow powers as much as I can, Ichigo told him. If it gets too bad, I'll just get Mom and get out of hell for a breather, but it shouldn't come to that. If Cazador ends up in control, he'll do the same. That all right with you, Yamamoto? Yamamoto nodded. That is acceptable. Keep us informed while we are in hell. Shihoin Yoruchi, my orders for the Godai 13 members stationed in the living world are unchanged, they are to remain here and guard against Togabito attack. However, I will shortly be sending a team trained in capturing a Togabito for study. Unless Kurosaki is willing to share one of his prisoners. Ichigo thought about it for a moment, then sighed and nodded his head. As much as he didn't want to give any sentient being to the mad scientist, he knew that if Kuratsuchi did come up with something it could mean the difference between winning and losing the war against Hell. If we have a prisoner who truly is on Hell's side, I'll bring him along when I go to Soul Society. Not sure how much good it'll do you, though, since all their chains are cut upon being taken capture as a precaution. The Quincy in the room stiffened, but kept his face carefully expressionless. That could pose a problem. Perhaps if you delivered more Togebido, my efforts to create a reliable anti-Togebido measure would proceed more smoothly, Kuratsuchi suggested. Don't press your luck, Ichigo growled. I haven't forgotten what you tried with me, and I'm under no illusions you'll be kinder to the poor BSTRD I'm delivering to your so-called care. Kuratsuchi raised his hands in surrender. Fine. Fine, I'll make do. He smiled broadly. I don't suppose you've changed your mind about that sample. No. Ichigo's denial was firm and unyielding. That answer will not change. Do not ask again, or you'll get your sample of my Ryatsu in a more direct manner. Kuratsuchi sighed. Still a selfish plebeian, then. Well, that was as blunt as a zero to the face, Ishida couldn't help but think, glancing up at Yamamoto. Strangely, the Soteicho was unfazed by Ichigo's not-so-subtle threat towards one of his Taicho. Then again, if Yamamoto had tried to defend Kuratsuchi, it could have compromised the fledgling relations between Ichigo and the Godei 13, perhaps he was leaving that matter to be handled by Ichigo? Or perhaps not. The Soteicho cleared his throat. The Togebido capture team will be sent to Karakura regardless to capture a Togebido with his chain intact, Yamamoto stated firmly. Kuratsuchi Taicho, do not antagonize Kurosaki, or I may just allow him to do as he wishes with you. Yes, Soteicho, a disgruntled Kuratsuchi acknowledged. The meeting wrapped up quickly after that, and Ichigo left, presumably to Hueco Mundo in order to pick which prisoner would be delivered to Soul Society and into Kuratsuchi's waiting hands. Ishida didn't really know how to feel about that. Even if it was a truly evil BSTRD, did anyone really deserve Kuratsuchi's brand of amoral care? Was it right to pay evil unto evil? Ishida's hands clenched even as his legs carried him through Karakura to his home. He understood the tactical necessity of it. He knew that Kuratsuchi Mayuri would probably be able to make something useful out of the knowledge he would glean from the Togebido. But that didn't make it right. Then again, Ishida knew intellectually that his lust to take bloody vengeance against the orchestrator of his grandfather's death twice over was hardly right either, but he doubted that would stop him if the opportunity arose. Did that make him a bad person? Ishida shook his head. No. At least, he didn't think so. He had every reason to loathe that monster in a man's skin, and his death could be considered a service to humanity. Ishida still remembered his first encounter with Kuratsuchi. The Taicho had turned his own men into bombs, and gotten away with it. And that was almost the least of his evils. But, despite it all, Kuratsuchi was, and the very idea made Ishida feel as though he needed to shower under scalding water. Kuratsuchi was useful. He could almost understand why the Godei 13 kept him. Almost. Ishida still felt that his inhumanity outweighed his worth as a scientist, but from Soul Society's point of view, it was a very gray area. In retrospect, Ishida mused, perhaps he should have expected a confrontation with Hell to raise troubling moral and ethical questions. No wonder Kurosaki had seemed tense about the subject of Zenai, if Zenai was truly a manifestation of some aspect of Ichigo. Arriving home, Ishida sighed and cleaned his glasses before lying down so he could rest for his next shift of Togebido target practice. He just hoped this was all over with soon. Ichigo stepped out of the Garganta and into Las Noches with a sigh. So much had been resolved, much to his amazement. His mother's safety post-rescue, peaceful relations with Soul Society, how and when they were going to take on Hell, it was astonishing to think that in the span of one meeting, nearly everything that weighed him down had been addressed. But there was one thing remaining that left a sour taste in his mouth. Ulquiorra. Ulquiorra appeared directly in front of him in a burst of sonido. Yes, Kurosaki-sama. Remind me later to ask you how the hell you're always there, even when I've only just arrived in Hueco Mundo. Ichigo shook his head. Anyway. We went through the prisoners the other day. Do you remember the ones who are genuinely on Hell's side? Ulquiorra's expression didn't change. Yes. Per your orders, they were separated and imprisoned well away from the other Togabito. Fetch the most devoutly loyal of them for me and meet me in the throne room in 30 minutes. Yes, Kurosaki-sama. Ulquiorra vanished in another display of sonido. Ichigo took a deep, steadying breath and sighed. He really did not want to do this. He really did not want to give Kuratsuchi a sentient being. It felt too much like sentencing him to a torturous death. But if Kuratsuchi was able to come up with something useful, then... Ichigo shook his head. He'd still feel guilty about it, but he'd be able to justify it better to himself. More so if it actually helped in saving his family. But first, he had a few things left to do here in Las Noches. 10 minutes later, he finished explaining everything to the wizard and Neliel. So with any luck, tonight this whole mess will be done with. Hollow Hiyori grinned fiercely. We're coming with you, right? Wrong, Ichigo told her firmly. For one thing, do you know your name? Hiyori's grin dropped instantly. No, she admitted. Remember that the atmosphere in hell made all the wizard, into mindless hollows that were only controlled because I was stronger than you, Ichigo told the wizard shortly. So I'm the only Shinigami hollow hybrid going in. No wizard, no Arankar. We don't want anything going wrong, and we especially don't want the Central 46 to get all stupid about us. The less they know, the better. Then what is our role in this? Asked Lisa, who currently was in Shinigami form. Defense? Ichigo nodded at her in appreciation. Exactly. Hell sent armies to Hueco Mundo repeatedly. You guys are to stay here and take out the trash. Capture where you can, and make sure Ulquiorra cuts their chains after everything's all over. Hollow Love nodded, hefting his gigantic kanabo. Right then. You can count on us. Come on, Hiyori, Lisa. We should rest in case Hell does send an army our way. Hiyori and Lisa nodded, the former more reluctantly. Ichigo sighed in relief. Thanks. As the wizard left, he turned to the former Espada, whose expression was difficult to read. Nell, are you alright? It is simply a bit sudden, she explained. I had not anticipated the final battle being so close at hand. But I do understand that whether you go or not, Soul Society is invading Hell, and so this is your best chance to get your mother out. She gave him a sad little smile. I'd like to fight at your side, Ichigo, but as you've explained, Hell has strange effects on Shinigami hollow hybrids. Ichigo tried to smile at her reassuringly, but the most he could manage was a melancholy smile of his own. I'd like you to fight at my side too, Nell. You've helped me so much in my short time here. I don't think I could have gotten this far without you. And it doesn't seem right that you can't be there with me. Neliel's expression lightened a little, but Ichigo was surprised when she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. Don't worry about it, Ichigo. I'll see you when you get back. It took him a moment, but Ichigo returned the hug. Right. See you soon, Nell. A few hours later, Ichigo stood in the main hall of the First Division, standing amongst half the Taicho of the Godiai. Hitsugaya and Tozen were apparently still in the living world. Unohana had explained after a quiet inquiry that Jin was apparently in a medically induced coma to recover from a compounded Ryuryoku injury, a concept that was completely beyond Ichigo's understanding. Amagai was missing, a fact which Ichigo heard also puzzled Yukitake and Kairaku, judging from their quiet conversation. Kuratsuchi was busy with the Togabito Ichigo had brought. Finally, Yamamoto silenced the room with a single echoing tap of his cane. We are here to plan our attack on Hell. Soifun Taicho, describe the terrain and the dangers. Hi. Hell is divided into several layers. The uppermost level is made of crisscrossing roads and buildings and is, or was, Soifun shot a look at Kurosaki. A popular hunting ground for the Kusinada, as a large number of weak Togabito reside there. In order to progress to the next level, you have to find a dead end with a pit and jump down. The second level is largely made of water, though there are stone islands present. The Togabito Kikuto stated that the islands have skeletons of Kusinada, and remaining on that level too long will cause the Kusinada to awaken and be reborn. The third level can only be accessed by diving deeply into the water from the second level. It appears to be a volcanic area. I cannot say much, merely that it leads to a cliff that allows one to move forward to the fourth level. The fourth level is an open desert, it sands ground from the bones of Togabito who have lost all hope and died permanently in hell. As Kikuto told it, the sand may retain some degree of malicious awareness. On this level, there is a pool of lava from which Shuren was able to resurrect other Togabito. That pool is guarded by 4 of Hell's lieutenants now, Ichigo interjected. When the eyes of several Taicho fell upon him, he shrugged. What? There's no way she would have known that, and you probably needed to know. What can you tell us about the lieutenants, Kurosaki? Yamamoto asked. They're somewhat weak to sneak attacks, Ichigo responded instantly. But they're well versed in team tactics. Their most troublesome guy is that Quincy, Ishida Heiken. But at the same time. He hesitated, not sure how to word it. He ended up letting me go. He was the one who told me about the Quincy contract, and asked me to save his descendants. He seems. I dunno, trapped. He might work with us, but he might not. What about the skill levels of the others? Yukitake asked curiously. They specialize in melee combat. One-on-one they're not so difficult, I'd say Ikaku or Rinji could handle them individually. But like I said, they work as a team, covering for each other, Ichigo explained. If you've got a few Fukutecho working together, they could handle it. He paused. Then again, there's that one guy. That one guy? Soifun echoed derisively. Well, I didn't exactly bother to learn his name after I cut him in half, Ichigo defended himself. He was the target of my sneak attack. Kinda hard to know what he's good at since I didn't give him a chance to show his stuff. I'm sure you know what I mean, assassin. The 2nd Division Taicho snorted, but said nothing. Yamamoto tapped the ground with his cane, bringing attention back to himself. Is there anything else to add, Soifun Taicho? Kurosaki. When neither appeared to have anything more to say, he nodded. Very well. Zaraki Taicho, Kamamura Taicho, Soifun Taicho, you are to accompany myself and Kurosaki Ichigo to hell. You may bring anyone of Fukutecho class or higher that you wish. Kairaka Taicho, I believe you have something to give Kurosaki. The normally jovial man nodded, his expression turning deadly serious as he approached the wizard. Ichigo, what I am about to give you is perhaps the most terrible weapon ever created by Soul Society. He reached into his haori and pulled out an ornately handled dagger and its sheath. Slowly, he unsheathed the dagger, revealing its wickedly jagged edge. This dagger is imbued with a spell designed by the Kido Corps. That spell should shatter Hell's soul as the Reo once did. Be aware that the spell is purely theoretical, untried, untested. It may work, or it may not, but I feel it may be our best chance. He sheathed the dagger and offered it to Ichigo, who took it carefully. To use the spell, you must charge the dagger with your Ryuryoku and then penetrate Hell's body with the blade. Shouldn't you be giving this to your resident assassin? Ichigo asked carefully, giving Soifun a sideways glance. My name is Soifun, the Taicho in question corrected irritably. I only bother to remember the names of people who deserve it, Ichigo retorted coldly. All you've ever been to me is Soul Society's assassin. So that's all you are to me. Your name is meaningless. Kairaka glanced between the cold expression on Ichigo's face, and the quiet fury that twisted Soifun's features, before sighing and straightening up. Any problems you two have need to be set aside while you're in this room, he told them both sternly. We are all on the same side. Cease sniping at each other, or you will not like the consequences. Soifan's face cleared into an emotionless mask in seconds. Yes, Kairaka Taicho. Ichigo took a breath and sighed, releasing the tension in his shoulders. Yes, Kairaka Taicho, he echoed. Kairaka nodded. Now then, in response to your question. I would give the dagger to Soifan Taicho, but the Kido core is uncertain whether the spell could be affected by a Ryuryoku's state of evolution. You have a better chance of affecting hell than she does, so the dagger goes to you. Understanding, Ichigo nodded acknowledgement and carefully stashed the dagger away. He was feeling more and more confident about their chances, now, even though the idea of carrying a weapon capable of that was more than a little chilling. He met Soifan's eyes, and though her expression was carefully blank, Ichigo thought he could see suspicion reflected in her eyes. The wizard's eyes narrowed slightly. He doubted he would ever get along with Soifan, despite sharing a mentor in Yoruchi. From the beginning, nearly every interaction he'd ever had with Soifan had been hostile. If Yamamoto Sotecho ever suggests you need to be eliminated, I will be the first to line up for the job. No. They would never be friends. Soifan would only ever be, at most, a reluctant ally. She'd made that abundantly clear. Ichigo was simply glad that Yamamoto had sworn to protect his family. Soifan wouldn't dare go against that. Soifan hadn't been entirely sure what to make of the last several hours. So much had changed in so short a time. In a single unexpected move from Yamamoto Sotecho, Kurosaki Ichigo was now firmly an ally of Soul Society, and what had seemed to be an inevitable conflict had been avoided altogether. It had caught her flat-foot, to say the least. She had fully expected Yamamoto to end up declaring war on him once Hell was defeated, or at least supporting the Central 40x's decision to do the same. It had been so easy to look at Kurosaki as an enemy. It was only a matter of time, she had thought, yet now they were on the same side, presumably permanently. Well, it wasn't like they had to be friends. Most of the Taicho were extremely wary of Kuratsuchi Taicho. Kuchiki Taicho and Zaraki not so privately hated each other's guts, but they were professional. Well, that's exaggerating a bit for Zaraki, and usually tended to ignore each other unless they were given a shared assignment, which was rare. There was no reason she and Kurosaki couldn't do the same. Kairaka Taicho's rebuke had been 100% spot on, and that it had been needed at all filled her with shame. They would have to work together for the mission in Hell, but presumably that would be the end of it. Kurosaki would go back to the living world, and if she was lucky she wouldn't so much as see him for a few decades. Even so, Soifan watched Kairaka Taicho give Kurosaki the enchanted dagger, doing her best to hide her resentment and suspicion. They were giving that to him. Instead of someone who had spent her whole life training to be the fastest, the stealthiest, the most efficient in the art of dealing death. Kurosaki met her eyes, narrowing his own, and she repressed a chill that ran down her spine. Was he considering using the dagger on her first, as a test run? Kairaka Taicho had said it was untried, and if she was honest, Soifan had to admit that of all the Taicho in the room, she was the one he had the most reason to kill. If you ever come after me or my friends, you will need Yamamoto Genryusai himself at your side to save you, because I swear I will come at you with all of my power. She met Kurosaki's eyes steadily, refusing to betray her nervousness. Soifan knew she stood no chance if Kurosaki chose to attack her. She, who had been unable to pierce eyes and skin, was almost certainly incapable of harming Kurosaki directly. But she would not lie down and die, either. Would the other Taicho attempt to stop him? Soifan wasn't sure. They did tolerate Kuratsuchi, after all, and from a purely value-oriented perspective, Kurosaki was more valuable than she was. Kurosaki finally shifted his gaze, and Soifan slowly breathed out through her nose, allowing her body to relax a fraction. His eyes had not reflected any bloodlust or even any malicious intent, just an assessment. Perhaps he was attempting to determine if she would attack him first. The thought almost made Soifan want to laugh. Like she would give him the satisfaction of being able to use self-defense as an excuse to kill her. No, she was not so foolish as to attack him directly. Nor would she attack his family, nor his friends. That was obviously a one-way ticket to death, either by Kurosaki's hands or by Yamamoto Sotecho's, and it would serve no purpose in any case. No. As much as she despised Kurosaki, she could and would work with him. The only question that remained now was, would he work with her? The meeting was over shortly afterwards, with each member of the invasion force naming whom they would want to bring along. Kamamura had elected to bring along Iba Tetsuzeman, his Fukutecho. Kenpachi had brought along Madarei Mikaku. Yamamoto and Soifun had each decided to leave their Fukutecho behind. Ichigo had thought to bring along Yamada Hanataro, the timid 4th Division member who had helped him so much while trying to save Rukia from execution, but when he asked Yamamoto about it, the Sotecho vetoed it. It is not a poor idea to bring a healer, especially one of such potential, Yamamoto told him quietly, but firmly. However, that is what he has right now, potential. According to Anohana Taicho, he suffers from poor confidence, and is generally unable to defend himself effectively. As the number of enemies is effectively infinite, he is unsuited to this mission. Ichigo nodded understanding, inwardly marveling that Yamamoto was actually bothering to explain his reasons. It was a refreshing change. What about one of the higher-ranked healers, then? Anohana's Fukutecho. He paused, trying to recall the name. Kotetsu Aisane, Yamamoto supplied. She is a wiser choice. Highly skilled in medical Kido, and not unversed in the other branches. She may accompany us. In just under an hour, everyone who was going to invade Hell was standing outside the Senkamen. Kuratsuchi Nimyu arrived shortly thereafter and bowed deeply to Yamamoto. Sotecho, I bring equipment from Kuratsuchi Taicho. Explain their purpose. Yes, Sotecho. Each of these are tracking devices, meant to aid in mapping Hell. They also serve as health monitors. She passed out a set of simple black wristbands to everyone, before holding up an earbud. These are interdimensional communicators. Kuratsuchi Taicho does not anticipate them to work for long, the power requirements for the continuous connection are too large. They will be remotely activated when you enter Hell. And why does Kuratsuchi Taicho believe we need these equipment? Yamamoto asked calmly. Nimyu bowed once more. I believe it has two purposes. The communicators and trackers in conjunction will allow me to guide Kotetsu Fukutecho to your locations, so as to prioritize healing appropriately. It also allows for a continuous stream of auditory information, with which Kuratsuchi Taicho may be able to devise further research in the event of this mission's failure. Very well. Yamamoto placed the band on his wrist, and put the earbud into his ear swiftly. The others quickly did the same. Then the Sotecho turned. Opened the Senkamen. Chad's head shot up as he sensed not one, not two, but many Tagabito entering Karakura. Inoue. I sense it too, Sato-kun. Inoue's face was grave, without a trace of a smile. It seems Hell has detected our efforts at negating his Reishi's influence, Yoruchi's voice commented calmly through their communicators. We must be doing something right. How many? Chad asked calmly, getting to his feet. And where? Enough to warrant bringing out the reserves, and all over Karakura. You know what to do, so get moving. Indeed they did, having discussed it with Yoruchi and Urahara earlier in case such an event happened. They looked at each other for only a moment more. Then Chad flashed away with his specialized high-speed movement. Inoue hopped up and without a word materialized her Santen Keshin, landing and kneeling on it. Take me higher. She rose higher and higher, until she could see Karakura in its entirety. A flicker of Shuunpa, and Hachijin materialized in front of her. He offered her a tiny smile. Are you ready, Inoue Oriheim? Yes. Chad was not having an easy time. He'd gone as quickly as he could to the school, to protect its inhabitants, but it seemed that he had somehow become the lone defender against a siege of Togabito. Chad grunted as one of the Togabito he was fighting landed another hard blow to his right arm. He counterattacked with his brazo izquierda del diablo. La muerte. The Togabito in question practically disintegrated from the devastating hit, but there was no time to think about that as Chad flashed away, narrowly avoiding a debilitating strike from a mace before delivering a deadly punch with his left arm, knocking the Togabito's head from his shoulders. It had been like that for a few minutes, but there was no rest. Even now, more portals were appearing nearby, some to take the corpses, some to deliver more Togabito. Sensing one just a few feet behind him, Chad leapt back, preparing himself. From this portal, another 2 Togabito came through, though these 2 were very familiar. Ha! Didn't think I'd see you again. Please, step aside. Don't make us kill you. It was Hana and Kieru, the Togabito whom had questioned Chad, Ishida and Inoue several days ago. Chad didn't move from his spot. Hell means to assimilate the living world, he said simply. I have no choice. Neither do we. They stared at each other for a long moment. Well, if you won't surrender, then I wish you luck, Hana offered. You'll forgive me if I don't wish you the same, Chad replied dryly. Hana snorted. Funny. And then she leapt into action, Kieru only a step behind her. Chad fell into a fighting stance. He wouldn't let them through without a fight. Licked Regan. Hana was forced to grab her partner and flash away in a high-speed technique to keep from being skewered by an onslaught of arrows. 2-on-1's a bit unfair, don't you think? Ishida landed next to Chad. Hana merely smirked. This area is worth 2 fighters of the living world. I wonder what area of Karakura is going unprotected. None, Chad replied simply. Can't you feel it? Ishida asked derisively. Failing that, can't you hear it? As if his words were a trigger, a hollow roar suddenly echoed loudly in the distance. Ishida used a single finger to shift his glasses further up his nose as he allowed himself a small smirk. He had timed that perfectly. Did you really think us short on capable defenders? Kurosaki is not the only Shinigami Hollow hybrid that resides here. Do you really think that killing us will end anything? Hana demanded. Don't you know the real purpose behind the invasions? Of course we do. Spiritual resonance, I believe Urahara-san called it. And as it happens, we already have someone on it. What person could possibly handle this much of Hell's Erasure? Kieru asked disbelievingly. What power could undo the changes? Chad merely pointed upwards, and to both Togabito's astonished disbelief, a golden dome replaced the sky for several seconds before becoming transparent, though all of them could still sense its presence. When Kieru and Hana had recovered enough to look back at their opponents, both Chad and Ishida were in battle-ready positions. Ishida raised his bow and aimed. Surrender, or I'll use these Quincy powers of mine to send you back to hell. I am. Shano. Soten Kishun. I reject. The 2 fairies sped off to opposite sides of Karakura. For a brief moment, Inoue wasn't sure it would work, but then a golden dome appeared over the city. Inoue closed her eyes and concentrated. She didn't want to prevent anything from leaving or entering. She wanted the dome to be transparent. When she opened her eyes, it was as she desired. Nicely done, Hachi complimented. How is the drain? Not bad, not when I'm not doing anything. She smiled at the wizard. Thanks for being here. Hachi smiled back. Restoring Ryuryoku is no trouble at all. I'm merely glad I can help. Are you ready for the hard part? Inoue nodded and closed her eyes again. She raised her arms, palms down towards the giant invisible shield she'd conjured. She focused on all the erasure of Karakura, and she could feel it slowly begin to change under the continuous onslaught of more and more portals to hell opening and closing. That was something she could not allow. I reject. Her Soten Kishun shuddered for a moment, and Inoue's face tightened with strain. But she could feel it begin to make a difference, could feel the erasure of the living world revert to how it should be. Inoue felt warmth of healing Kido spread from the top of her head down to the rest of her body and smiled, relieved as she immediately began to feel better. Hachi had her back. With his help, she would protect the living world. Chapter 73, Men and Gods. Ichigo's expression was calm as he stepped foot into hell for the third and hopefully final time. He'd prepared himself as best he could, and he was working side by side with Yamamoto Genryusai Shigekuni, the most powerful pure Shinigami born in thousands of years. It was time to bring this conflict to an end. Behind him, the Senkamen closed as Kotetsu Aisane stepped through, the last person to arrive. "Your orders, Soteicho?" Soifun asked deferentially. Yamamoto cast his gaze upon hell. They'd entered the uppermost level, judging from Soifun's descriptions. Yet he could not see even a single Kusanada. While that would make traversing hell easier for the moment, it was troubling. Had hell made the effort to reabsorb the rest of his soul fragments? Had he regained his full strength? It made no difference, they had no choice but to move forward. "We move. Soifun Taicho, lead us to the next level." "Hi, Soteicho." She leapt onto one of the blue roads and began to run, mindful to keep her speed low enough that everyone could keep up easily. Yamamoto decided to stay in the back, near to the Fukuteicho and Kurosaki. If he was lucky, perhaps he'd overhear their conversations. "So, what's with the new look?" Madarame asked curiously. "I'm more than just a Shinigami," Kurosaki answered calmly. "More than that, I'm not a member of the Godai 13, so I have no right to wear that uniform. This is what I came up with instead. Black for the part of me that is Shinigami, white for the part of me that is hollow. I am Vizard, and that is not going to change." He shrugged. It seemed to help with getting hollows to listen to me, anyway, being able to tell with just a glance that I'm not part of the Godai 13. Yamamoto frowned slightly to himself. Kurosaki's reticence in joining the Godai 13 had been explained to him by Kairaku Shunsui. While frustrating, his reasons were understandable. Perhaps in time, when tensions relaxed and relations were smoother, they could revisit the issue. "I thought this place would have more people," Madarame commented as they ran. Indeed, the people they saw were few and far between, hiding the instant they saw movement. "It did, last time I was here," Kurosaki replied quietly. Yamamoto listened, but took care not to appear so. "But I think most of them are in Hell's army now." "What makes you say that?" Iba questioned. "One of the Tagabito at Las Noches, Suki, told me that Hell's lieutenants came recruiting. Given the choice between being eternally hunted by Kusanada, without food, without rest, or joining the local army and being guaranteed the necessities to make life a little more bearable." Yamamoto gave the slightest of nods to himself. It was as he'd expected. Desperation was a powerful motivator. Still though, he wondered, had Kurosaki really developed the stomach for interrogation? Or had this Suki volunteered the information? "Kurosaki-san, I find myself curious, do you know what sin she had committed?" Kamamura queried. Kurosaki shook his head negatively. "Never really came up. She just wanted to be purified and sent on to her next life. Failing that, she was ready to send herself to the desert Soifun mentioned." "The one made from the bones of Tagabito?" Madarame asked incredulously. "Yeah. Purification or oblivion. I convinced her to wait, to see if we had a method of determining if a person had repented their sin in the afterlife." Yamamoto repressed a sigh. Sadly, no such technique currently existed to his knowledge. It had never been needed, really. Konso worked for plus souls, and hollows found purification through being slain by Kido or Zanpakuto. On the other hand, perhaps Konso could work, potentially. All souls had the power to purify themselves. It was the reason why many humans could make their way to soul society immediately upon their demise without requiring assistance from Shinigami. It might just be possible for Togabito to purify themselves of their sins in life, perhaps through genuine repentance. If that were the case, then a Kanso would be all the push that was needed to send the Togabito onwards to Soul Society. Once the chains were removed, of course. Perhaps when the current crisis was over, he could set up a semi-permanent outpost in Hell. A highly trained squad of Shinigami, rotating out periodically, performing Kanso on any Togabito that requested it. Kuratsuchi would likely have a solution to the chain problem once the Togabito capture team succeeded in acquiring an appropriate subject. This bore thinking about more, but now was not the time. Yamamoto made a mental note, promising himself to come back to it later, before returning his attention to his present surroundings. Down here, Soifun said curtly, having reached the end of the path. She dove without another word, and the others followed a few moments after. Piercing through to the second level of Hell, Yamamoto blinked in surprise, coming to a stop in midair along with everyone else. Completely opposed to how Kurosaki and Soifun had described, there were Togabito everywhere. Kurosaki grunted. What's going on? Did they decide to use this place for training? Use your eyes, Kurosaki, Soifun rebuked. Surely you can see that circle of Togabito. They're doing something. Indeed, there was a ring of Togabito, perhaps 7 of them. Seconds later, a red portal appeared, and perhaps a dozen other Togabito leapt through before it collapsed on itself. It's a departure point, Kamamura observed. Hell is attacking, the question is, the living world or Hueco Mundo? Or even Soul Society? My instruments detect no Togabito in Soul Society at this time, Sotecho, Kuratsuchi's voice reported instantly. They appear to be entirely focused on the living world at this time. Yar. Another familiar voice interjected. Mind if I use this line? You were so kind setting it up, Mayuri. Urahara Kisuk, the 12th Division Taicho hissed. Get off. It was clear the exile wasn't listening at all. Oh, you don't mind? Thanks. Anyway, just letting you know, the living world seems to be doing well for the moment, but I might suggest hurrying along. Or perhaps hindering them somehow. I don't know how long everyone can last against such a continued assault. Got it, Urahara, Kurosaki replied. Keep me posted. Of course. Kurosaki turned to face Yamamoto, and the latter knew exactly what he was about to ask. Holding up a hand to forestall the request, the wizened Sotecho merely nodded at him. Kurosaki, you and I will continue alone to face Hell. Everyone else, do your duty. Protect the living world. Hi. With that, they all leapt into action, Zaraki and Madarame laughing the whole way. Kurosaki nodded at Yamamoto with appreciation in his eyes, and Yamamoto felt a brief surge of satisfaction. Kurosaki was beginning to see the Godei 13 in a more positive light. Good. That would ease communications and relations between their forces. Kurosaki. Lead the way. All right. Let's go. Kurosaki flashed away with Shunpa, flying at high speed directly towards the ocean below. Yamamoto followed, making a mental note of Kurosaki's skill in Shunpa. It was faster than many of his Taicho. Perhaps some remedial training was in order. Then again, Kurosaki had been trained by Shihoin Yoruchi, the goddess of flash. It was only to be expected, Yamamoto supposed. Several seconds after diving into the water, Kurosaki and Yamamoto emerged into the third level of Hell, an area littered with yellow lava pools. Just a moment, Kurosaki requested. What is it? I'm just checking something. I'll only be a few seconds. Kurosaki closed his eyes and took a breath, focusing before reaching out and touching thin air. No. If he focused, Yamamoto could make out ribbons. Ryuraku. Kurosaki was using Ryuraku to track his mother. Smart. If Hell wasn't immediately nearby, he could simply grab her and go. Is she on this level, Kurosaki? No. Ichigo's scowl intensified. She's in the desert somewhere. He shook his head. Her Ryatsu is too weak to get an exact location. Not from here. I'll try again when we get to that level. He nodded to himself. All right. Let's keep moving. Yamamoto nodded, re-evaluating his opinion of Kurosaki yet again. How many times had he had to do that in the last year? In the last month, even. He'd lost count. When he had first seen Kurosaki Ichigo face to face, as the boy had dramatically saved Rukia from her execution, that was all Yamamoto had seen, a boy, one with more power than Yamamoto would have liked, but a mere child nonetheless. A boy who adhered to simple ideals, a boy who was only beginning to learn wisdom, a boy who needed time to grow into his potential, a boy who needed to be guided carefully to ensure that everything that Yamamoto held dear would not be destroyed. When Yamamoto had interacted with him in the false Karakura, during the confrontation with Aizen's forces, he had seen something similar but distinctly different. The Soteicho had seen a rebellious teenager, one who had formed his own opinions, made his own decisions and resented being treated as a child while being forced to carry the responsibilities of a man. Not long later, when Kurosaki Masaki had been kidnapped, Kurosaki Ichigo had appeared before him with such barely controlled rage that Yamamoto had seen what he had suspected might lay there since the beginning, a side that promised death and destruction to any and all who dared to strike at his heart. A side that had seemingly confirmed the inevitability of war with Kurosaki. The brief communication with Zangetsu's manifested spirit, and that had been quite a shock, considering whom Zangetsu resembled so closely, had only lent more credit to that idea. But then Kurosaki had prostrated himself, begging for help in saving his mother from hell. And in that moment, Yamamoto had seen a desperate man. The amount of growth that Kurosaki had displayed, in mere days, he'd matured so much. And despite their ensuing confrontation outside the Barine home, that impression had remained. Yamamoto had understood, much as he had not wanted to. Kurosaki had been desperate, and so he took the only choice he could see. Yet now, when Yamamoto cast his gaze upon Kurosaki Ichigo, Yamamoto saw neither an idealistic boy nor a desperate man, nor anything in between. Kurosaki was keeping his Ryatsu within the realm of his perception, at least for the moment, and Yamamoto had had millennia to hone his ability to read and translate Ryatsu. He no longer needed to meet his opponent's Zanpakuto with his own to feel and understand the emotions that echoed in their Ryatsu. And as Yamamoto examined Kurosaki's Ryatsu, there was no rage. No joy. No sorrow, no hate, no love, no fear, nothing at all beyond a calm certainty. Kurosaki Ichigo was absolutely certain that he would succeed in what he set out to do. No hindrance would hold him long. Any setback was only temporary. He did not feel this way out of arrogance or pride. Yamamoto would have been able to detect hints of those. And so what Yamamoto saw right then, was an exceedingly dangerous man. Anyone who could enter that unfettered state of mind, that mindset of perfectly calm willingness to achieve absolute victory at all cost, was someone to watch carefully. If that person was someone of Kurosaki's power, well, perhaps he did have the potential to seal away hell after all. And if Yamamoto was lucky, and played his cards with care, perhaps he would have an ally who could fight at his side when Yawatch finally made his move. Underneath the sands of the desert, in Hell's hideaway, Zenai raised his head. He could feel it, Kurosaki Ichigo was in Hell. Like it or not, it was time for the final confrontation. He's here. It was not a question. Either Masaki had unknown till then sensing abilities, or Zenai was just that easy to read. The Togabito wasn't sure which he preferred. Even so, he turned towards Masaki, who met his gaze evenly. Yes, he is. So what are you going to do, Zenai? Whose side are you on? Hell's? Or my son's? Zenai chuckled as he stood up. Whose side am I on? I'm on the same side I've always been on. As for what I'm going to do. He flashed a cocky smile in her direction before vanishing from her sight and reappearing directly behind her, Zangetsu drawn and ready. What are you? Masaki yelped in surprise as Zenai effortlessly cut off the chains that held her to the wall, leaving the currently intangible chains of hell, and hefted her over his shoulder in a smooth movement. "What does it look like I'm doing?" Zenai asked with a tone that practically oozed amusement. "I'm kidnapping you." As Zenai took off running towards the stairs, Masaki breathed a silent sigh of mingled relief and exasperation. "Did you have to throw me over your shoulder like a sack of potatoes?" she demanded. "You can't run as fast as I can," Zenai replied easily as he leapt out into the desert air, flickering into Shunpa. "I could if I had my powers," Masaki grumbled under her breath. If she hadn't lost her powers, then this whole mess would never have happened. She could have taken down those kidnappers, so she never would have been trapped and sent to hell. Then again, if she hadn't lost her powers, she wouldn't have died in the first place, and Ichigo would have grown up very differently. You say something? No. Good, because we're here. Masaki didn't even have time to blink before Zenai had set her down on her feet, just in time to see two people emerge onto this level of hell. "Looks like Ichigo's brought along the old man." And so he had, but Masaki's eyes were drawn only to the younger of the two. "Ichigo." "Mom." The single word was filled with so much relief that Masaki could only smile. "You alright?" "I'm fine. Thanks to Zenai." Ichigo's gaze left his mother's, and he locked eyes with the man who shared his face. He stepped towards him and nodded. "Thanks, Zenai." Zenai's eyes narrowed. Wait. There had been something in the way Ichigo had said that, the way that he had thanked him. It had been genuinely appreciative. No reservation at all. Ichigo should still have been reserved, confused about his nature, unless. His expression lightened somewhat, appearing half hopeful, half disbelieving. "You get it, don't you? You know what I am." "I do," Ichigo agreed calmly. "Let's get Mom out of here, and then we can figure out how to fix this." Zenai smiled. "Shall we break the chains together, then?" His voice was eager, but his body language reflected his true feelings. He was unsure if Ichigo was telling the truth. "Yes," Ichigo answered quietly. "Let's protect her together." Masaki was stunned to see Zenai's face practically shine with relief and hope. Just what part of Ichigo was Zenai? Obviously Ichigo had figured it out, and the curiosity was killing her. But that was a question for another time. Apparently Yamamoto agreed, as the old man cleared his throat. "Kurosaki, Zenai." Right, Ichigo interrupted. "Come on, Zenai. Let's get out of hell and break her chains." "Chains first," Zenai corrected. "They should be weaker right now, if hell's not focusing directly on them. If we get her out of hell, he'll sense it and strengthen them." "Fair enough," Ichigo acceded. "And don't bother powering up just yet," the Togabito told him sternly. "Hell gave me some of his power, the chains should recognize it and break without you announcing your presence." Nodding grimly, Ichigo took a step back, allowing the manifestation of his desire to protect to do as he wished. Zenai took a breath, and focused hard. Masaki gave a startled gasp as she felt Hell's chains shift on her, materializing several feet of them. Zenai drew Hell's Zanpakuto. "Reveal the truth, Asahi no Kagami." And then he swung downwards with all his strength. To everyone's surprise, the chains glowed brightly just before impact, and a bolt of what looked like red lightning jumped out of the chain and into Zenai's chest. Zenai crumpled to the ground. Ichigo's eyes went wide even as he dashed over to Zenai. What just happened? I assume that's not a normal occurrence when attempting to cut the chains?" Yamamoto asked quietly. "No. The chains are static, they don't fight back like that." Ichigo answered disbelievingly, holding out a hand for Zenai to take. The Togabito grasped it readily. It was hell. Zenai grunted as he slowly got to his feet. He rubbed his chest and took a steadying breath. It was a trap. Or maybe a warning. Hell knew from the beginning that the only one I would attempt to free was her. I should have guessed. But it was worth a shot. Ichigo frowned. Was it the chains, you, or the combination? I have no idea. Zenai shook his head. New plan. Let's get her out of hell, and then you can try. I have a different plan, a new voice stated dryly from directly behind them. I kill you all, and I win. Ichigo and Zenai leapt away in mirrored actions, now standing on either side of Masaki, blades drawn and ready. I think I like Zenai's plan better, Ichigo replied contemptuously. Kurosaki. Yamamoto barked out. Take her and go. Ichigo nodded at him, and in a flicker of shunpa, he and his mother were gone. Hell quirked an eyebrow at Yamamoto and Zenai. He was smiling, a small but supremely confident smile, as if nothing had changed, as if he was still in complete control of the situation. Do you really think I'll let them escape? I should ask the same to you, Yamamoto replied, raising his Ryatsu to the point where flames were beginning to lick at the sands around his feet. His cane lit a flame, and a moment later, the strongest fire-type Zanpakuto in Soul Society was released in the Soteicho's hands. Do you truly believe that I'll let you pass? Hell chuckled even as fire engulfed their surroundings, encircling them. You still don't understand. Even if you did somehow manage to restrain me in this very spot, and you do not have that power, I don't need to pass you to keep them here. He spread his arms wide, gesturing towards their surroundings. This world is mine, Yamamoto. Yamamoto's expression was unchanged. I understand more than you think, Hell. I don't understand the mechanics of how it came to be, but this world is certainly yours. It's tied to your will. Which means that if you are distracted, if your will slips, then Kurosaki will succeed. His eyes opened minutely. And that, Hell, is certainly within my power. Hell's smile cracked, and then fell completely from his face. I see. I underestimated your perception. That won't happen again. Allow me to honor you by allowing you to see the truth of yourself, the folly of your own existence. Reveal the truth, Asahi no Kagami. Yamamoto readied his blade. You fool. You truly believe that I hold no chance against you. You believe that you know me, that you know the strength of my soul. Don't I? Hell responded. You are the Soteicho of the Gotei 13, an incredibly strong Shinigami, strong enough to give Aizen Sosuke pause, but no more than that. Humph. You must be acquiring your information from one of the traitors Arankar. Allow me to tell you exactly whom you are dealing with. Yamamoto swung Ryujin Jaka at his opponent, letting loose a wave of fire. Hell promptly disappeared and reappeared a short distance away. My name is Yamamoto Genryusai Shigekuni. I have lived for millennia, in times of war and in times of peace. I have made many mistakes. I have won impossible victories. I have committed terrible atrocities, ordered and led utter genocide, not once, not twice, but thrice, in the name of world balance, in the name of sanity, in the name of the human soul. Yamamoto's eyes opened the slightest crack as he allowed his Ryatsu to flare out even further, and fire seemed to engulf him, yet never burning him. I am he who conquered Soul Society and united the strongest under my rule. I am he who fought and survived the first Quincy, Yawatch, 1,000 years ago, destroying his powers. Yamamoto took vicious pleasure in seeing Hell begin to pale, and finally let his full Ryatsu loose for complete intimidation factor. Fire was everywhere, flame touched everything, and the very sand that Yamamoto stood upon burned to ash. Gods, how long had it been since he had really been able to let loose, to bring every bit of his power to bear against a worthy opponent? I have had 1,000 years since then to increase my power, Hell. Now taste the ever-burning flame of my soul. Bankai. All of the fire that Yamamoto had generated swirled towards his blade, as if sucked in by some invisible vortex. A mere second later, Yamamoto was holding an ancient and worn katana, blackened and burnt. Zenka no Tachi. Now. Yamamoto bared his teeth in utter defiance. Can the fires of hell compare to me? Completely forgotten by the two opponents, Zenai had taken the opportunity to chase after Ichigo and Masaki. He wanted to be reunited with Ichigo as soon as possible, after all. And Ichigo had completely forgotten that Zenai, as a Togabito, should be capable of opening a portal back to the living world. Idiot, Zenai muttered. The Togabito barely blinked as he felt Asahi's presence disappear, as he felt the lone blade return to her true master. He'd known it was coming, after all, hell or not, it was suicide to take on the Sotecho without a weapon. It was too bad, though, he'd been curious if Ichigo would be able to wield Asahi no Kagami after they reunited. Zenai finally managed to catch up to Ichigo on the second level of this med dimension, the one where Hell's forces had been mobilizing to invade the living world. Emerging from the water swiftly, he came to a stop in midair, a few feet away from Ichigo, who appeared completely stunned. Turning to see what Ichigo was staring at, Zenai's jaw dropped. Even he hadn't expected the kind of carnage that he was seeing now. The islands were virtually covered in blood and bodies. Madarame Ikaku was laughing madly as he attacked with his bankai. Crimson life was splashed across Ikaku's bare chest, face and arms. The dragon emblem on his bankai was completely filled and shining a bright, bloody red. Every swing was shattering chains, every hit was slicing a Togabito to ribbons, every miss was flinging Togabito dozens of meters away simply from the pressure of the attack. Not one to be left behind, Zaraki was dashing through the Togabito, leaving piles of bodies behind. At some point, his eye patch had come off, and his enormous, oppressive Ryatsu could be clearly felt even where Ichigo was. The bells in his hair jingled sweetly, continuously, in stark contrast to the destruction that Zaraki was committing with every step. Not too far away, Kamamura had activated his bankai and was outright crushing dozens of Togabito with every swing of his sword. Iba was nearby, using his Shikai to kill any Togabito that got too close or tried to sneak behind the wolf Taicho. Between the two of them, neither seemed to have acquired any injuries. Soifun and Kotetsu hung back, not engaging in the fighting but keeping a close eye on everyone. Well, I have a newfound respect for those guys. I'm just glad that Zaraki and Madarame held back against us when we invaded Soul Society, Zenai finally said. No kidding, Ichigo agreed. You fought those guys? Masaki screeched. And lived? Neither Ichigo nor Zenai really hurt her. The portal's unstable, Ichigo commented. We probably shouldn't take that way out. I'll try to open a portal myself, Zenai volunteered. He took a moment, concentrated his power, only to have it fizzle out as he attempted to form the portal. DMN. Should have known, Hell's restricted the ability to generate portals again, I bet you anything that only his most trusted have that power now. Ichigo narrowed his eyes as he tapped his earbud. Kuratsuchi. Send me a Jigakucho. There was no response. Oi. Anyone there? Still nothing. DMN it. Nimue did say that they wouldn't last long. Wait, you got here through Soul Society? Zenai asked. Yeah. Dimension shifting, that sort of thing. The Dangai is now between Hell, Soul Society, and the living world. Now shut up, I'm trying to get us out of here. Ichigo focused his intent, and tried to open a Senkaman himself, to no avail. Then he tried opening a Garganta. That didn't work either. Ichigo let out a growl of frustration. Hell's really got the place locked up tight, and I don't want to risk taking Mom through that unstable portal. It was then that Ichigo felt it, an immense wave of fiery power coming from where he'd left Yamamoto. He turned around in surprise. This is way stronger than when he used Shirkai. Did he go Bankai? Doesn't matter. We've got to get her out of here, Zenai reminded Ichigo. None of our planned exit strategies have panned out. Do you have any ideas? Ichigo asked pointedly. As a matter of fact, I do. We blow open the gates of Hell. Ichigo paused for a moment to consider, then shrugged. Works for me. That way I can get back inside to help seal hell. Let's go. Masaki just stared at her son and Zenai disbelievingly. Did you just say that you were going to blow up the gates of hell? Blow open, Zenai corrected, but yep. Now up you get. The Togabito swept Masaki over his shoulder and began flying upwards towards the topmost level of hell, Ichigo right on his heels. Masaki just stared into nothing. Her son had just nonchalantly agreed to blow up the gates of hell. Her son had put together an army, defied the ruler of hell, and just agreed to blow up the gates of hell. For her. A small part of her brain reminded her that Ichigo had always been obsessed with protecting her, even when he was young. Ichigo had always put on that smile whenever he could do anything for her, even if it had only been walking between her and the road on rainy days so she wouldn't get splashed by cars. Ichigo had started attending a dojo because he wanted to protect her, Yuzu and Karin. At the time, it had been adorable. Later, it had become much more serious. Even so, Masaki had understood his motivations for becoming a Shinigami, for saving Rukia, for fighting Aizen. They had made sense. Ichigo had wanted to protect his family, so he became a Shinigami. Ichigo had wanted to repay a debt, and so he saved Rukia. Ichigo had found himself in a position to help protect Karakura, so he'd fought Aizen. In all of those fights, he'd fought people. People with supernatural powers, sure, but people nonetheless. Shinigami and hollows they may be, but gods they were not. They were not immortal, merely long-lived. They were not invincible, merely durable. They were not all-powerful, merely strong. They had limits within the realm of conceivability. Even Ichigo, who had defeated Aizen, had such limits. He could still be injured, or even die. He still required food and water for life. He still felt the needs of human companionship. Ichigo was still mortal. But hell. Hell defied comprehension. Zenai had told Masaki what he knew, at her request. When he was killed, he did not die. He created from nothing. He subsisted on nothing. Togabito could draw on his power at will to protect themselves and attack their foes. It had literally taken a god, the Reo, the ultimate ruler of the afterlife, to shattering Hell's soul to eliminate the threat, and even then, Hell's soul had persisted in the form of Kushinada. There was no other word that Masaki could use to describe Hell. Hell was a god. So the question that burned in Masaki's mind right then was simply this: how could a mortal defeat a god? They reached the gates of hell within a few minutes. You ready? Zenai asked. Ichigo grunted an affirmative, and Masaki watched curiously as his face took on an expression of concentration. He drew Zangetsu, but even before it was fully drawn, black flame washed over him. A few seconds later, Ichigo had entered Bankai and Resurrection. He took a deep breath, gathering his power. Zenai. Shield her, because I'm not going to hold back. Obediently, Zenai moved to protect Masaki with his body. The former Quincy poked her head around him to watch, though. Masaki's eyes went wide as she watched red light spiral into existence between his horns, growing larger and larger. And then she saw him purposely cut his hand with Tensa Zangetsu. She was about to question him, but her voice died as she saw the blood float upwards, integrating with Zero, turning it black as pitch. Gran Rei Zero. Despite bracing herself, Masaki was unprepared for the raw power of the attack. It hadn't exploded against the gates, or pushed them open. It had ripped through them. There was now a gigantic circular hole directly in the center of the gates, easily tall enough for a being twice Ichigo's size. And then all three of them froze when they heard an ominous chuckle not far behind them. Oh bravo! Well done! Ichigo turned around. Sure enough, there was Hell, standing there and chuckling as though they had just told a merry joke. So, you got past Yamamoto? He demanded, stepping between his mother and Hell. Oh, not yet, Hell admitted. I'm still down there. And at the same time, I'm here. I must say, I should thank you, Kurosaki Ichigo. What for? Hell merely smiled knowingly at him. Why do you think all my Togabito use portals? Why did I not just have them leave out the front door? Because if you managed to materialize the gates in the living world, it would provide a singular location to defend, Ichigo retorted. I'm not stupid. Of course not. But let me ask you something, Kurosaki Ichigo. Why would I put the gates in this dimension, when I want all souls to come under my sway? Why would I place a barrier that could hinder me? Obviously so that your enemies couldn't get in, Ichigo replied simply. You were at war with the Reo and the king of Hueco Mundo after all. No, Ichigo, Zenai corrected, narrowing his eyes. Remember, all of Hell's forces will revive shortly in this dimension upon death. And any who die here become Togabito. There's no reason for Hell to stop anyone from coming in or going out. Absolutely right. So, naturally, I am not the one who made the gates. Can you guess who did? Behind the mask of his resurrection, Ichigo's eyes widened. The Reo. He breathed. It was to protect the living world, the humans who weren't part of the war. He must have wanted to ensure that no one would accidentally make their way into Hell, that no one tried to fight you alone. And to keep you here, where you could do the least damage. Oh, you're good. Hell's grin turned positively predatory. The gates have never responded to my will. I could unleash my full power against it, and the gates wouldn't budge an inch. The Reo designed the gates to open only for newly med souls to be claimed, or if someone sufficiently powerful, someone whose powers contained no trace of my own, struck them. Wait, but weren't the gates opened earlier? Zenai asked. They were, by a group of 3 Shinigami, Hell agreed amenably. However, I was not prepared to take advantage of that opportunity, having just been reborn. But I knew that as long as I held your mother, Kurosaki Ichigo, you would come back for her. All I had to do then was remove every other option besides opening the gates. Which you have just done for me. So, I thank you, Kurosaki Ichigo. For you have just given me the last thing I needed. And with that, Hell walked right through the hole in the gates, and into the living world.